Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's monthly compendium for the month of August 2022. Case file number 704, written by Sarah Vivian. My necklace impossibly reappeared miles away. I was about 6, maybe 7 years old when this happened. I'm 31 now. My mom had given me an expensive gold or gold-plated necklace. I remember it having some kind of heart charm on it. I really adored this necklace. I looked at it as a cool adult thing that made me more mature given it was old and expensive. I was, and still am, precocious, so I guess at the time, she believed in me to be more responsible with something as precious as this. I wore it all day at school, showing anyone and everyone how beautiful it was, expressing my excitement. Straight after school, I had to go to a babysitter's house who looked after several other kids, and of course, thought this would be a great place to show off my new necklace. However, as little kids tend to be, I was clumsy with it outside on the wood-planked porch, and ended up dropping the necklace, which landed on the ground beneath the tight floorboards in the dirt. Some of the other kids and myself tried to retrieve the necklace, but to no avail. I was devastated and felt like I failed my mom by losing the necklace. When she came to pick me up, I explained what happened and she herself tried to retrieve it, but once again, to no avail. So we ended up leaving empty-handed, with me being scolded on the way home for being irresponsible with such an expensive piece of jewelry. At the time, when you first walked into our house, my mom had a very small but tall entry table to place keys and wallets on when you first entered the house. We arrived at home, walked through the front door, and to our shock and surprise, the necklace we had abandoned that I lost through the floorboards of my babysitter's deck was sitting on the entry table. No one else lived with us besides my 11-year-old brother who was at a friend's house during the entire duration of all of this. He was not with us when our mom picked me up. He knew nothing about the necklace, and even if he had, there was no way he could have gone from the sitters with the necklace and back to our house before we got there. By car it was a maybe 7-minute drive, but at least 30 to 40 minutes to walk, and like I said, he was not even home. This was also in the 90s. We didn't have cell phones. It's not like my mom would have called him, told him about the necklace, followed by him somehow retrieving it and beating us home with it. And even if by some Twilight Zone way, my brother loves praise, there's no way he would have done something like that without mentioning it. No one else had keys either, and again, only my mom and I knew about the misplaced necklace in our family. We both looked at each other dumbfounded, and my mom said, We left the necklace behind. How is it here? I didn't give it much thought or really cared how. I had my necklace back. I believed it was some kind of guardian angel bringing it back to me, as silly as that may sound. I was so grateful it was back. However, the very next day, the necklace vanished again. I haven't seen it since. We searched high and low, but it never turned back up. I even checked the sitter's porch again, as I spent several visits there after this incident, and nope, it wasn't there either. I even asked if other kids found it somehow and retrieved it from the boards even though I had found it in my house, but no one had seen it and there was no talk of anyone fishing it out. Many years later, I still wonder where it disappeared to the second time. I felt really let down by the idea that it was some angel who brought it back to make me happy, only for it to indefinitely go missing again the next day. Now fast forward a decade or so later. I'm 15 years old, still in the same town and state, but living in a different house. One evening, my mom and I went to the mall to go shopping. We finished up at Hot Topic, back when it used to be cool, where I purchased a band patch to sew onto my jacket and some soft pink dangly electric guitar earrings. As we were exiting the mall, I was excitedly checking out the merch I bought, thinking about what outfits I'd wear with my new earrings, when my mom started a conversation with me. Out of respect, I decided to put my lute away so I could focus on what she was saying. I distinctly remember putting the earrings and patch carefully tucked into my right, very deep and very large jacket pocket. Seriously, I cannot emphasize enough at how deep and large the pockets were. Now fast forward to us getting home. I take off my shoes, about to take off my jacket, but before I do, I reach to pull my merch out, and I find nothing. The pocket was completely empty. Not even the receipt was in there. I think, okay, maybe I actually put them in my left pocket, but I imagined my right, even though I remember vividly putting them wrapped up in my right pocket. Well, nothing was in my left pocket either. I get nervous, wondering. Okay, maybe somehow the stuff came out in the car? That doesn't seem right though. Remember how deep I said the pockets were? But for logic's sake, I checked the entire car. Again, I found nothing. I check outside underneath the car, in the driveway, the entryway, my pants pockets, everywhere. But they are absolutely nowhere to be found. I'm really upset at this point, and I tell my mom what's up. She checks everywhere I did and then some, but still neither of us can find the stuff. I sunk in defeat and just thought, whatever. Somehow I must have dropped them at the mall or the parking lot. I guess someone got real lucky at my expense. And went to bed pretty sad. The very next day, like within the first 2 minutes of being awake, I had this strong gut feeling that if I put my hand in my right jacket pocket, my earrings and patch would be inside. I couldn't even argue with this feeling. It felt like I already knew something. It was so strong. Almost a voice that I couldn't hear with my ears. So I obliged. I picked up my jacket, slipped my hand in the right pocket, and to my absolute shock and amazement were my earrings and band patch. No receipt though, which was the only thing missing, and still was never found, which was strange because I wrapped it around my stuff, but I didn't really care. I found my stuff. Immediately, I went to my mom and showed her the previous missing loot. Her eyes went huge and she was happy for me, but then asked where they were found. I replied, the place I left them before, in my right jacket pocket. She went pale with a shocked expression and she said, I checked your jacket last night. Those were not there. We looked at each other perplexed, and I shrugged. I wasn't really sure how to respond other than it must be the ghosts or the aliens picking on us again. The earrings and patch never went missing again after they were found, unlike the necklace. At the time, we really genuinely believed there was a trickster or something to that effect messing with me. My mom, brother, and myself were all very superstitious as a lot, and I mean a lot of paranormal activity has happened my whole life. My brother and mom both claimed to have seen aliens multiple times, which is why we thought genuinely that it was something like that. But now, I'm not so sure. All I can say is it was very strange, but I'm grateful I got my stuff back. Still wondering why whatever took my stuff kept the receipt. Case notes for file 704. My necklace impossibly reappeared miles away. It's been a little while since I narrated a disappearing object phenomena, or DOP. I do love them, but there haven't been as many lately. Although of course this story happened a while ago, so it's not too surprising then. I would say this one exceeds them by a country mile. It's a fascinating disappearing object phenomena experience, because it came back and then disappeared again. I don't know what the hell's going on with that. Whoever's taking it and returning it is not making up their mind, huh? As you say, there's no possible way it could be your brother, because there's no way he could move that fast. And he didn't even know about it disappearing or that you even had it to begin with, so yeah, it couldn't be him. Couldn't be your mom. She was there with you, you saw everything she did, and she couldn't get it. And it couldn't be anyone that was at the babysitter's home. The only thing it could be is a force of nature or some entity that wanted to return it for you. But then why take it back? It's almost like you have competing forces. You have some sort of guardian angel or guardian spirit watching over you, but then you also have some sort of trickster attached to you. And I mentioned this in our email interaction where you probably do have entities connected to you. Well, I thought it was just a trickster, but then you said there are multiple entities. Could be. Normally spirits or echoes, they latch on to a specific object or location, but I guess there's no reason it couldn't be a person too. Maybe some family member that passed away, maybe even some cursed object. I could see that, where an echo latches onto an object, but if you interact with an object enough, hell, maybe it is even the necklace that's doing that. But then it was stolen away again, and the curse will still persist. So it's not really a curse exactly, it's almost like a charge that was passed along to you. And through this charge, the echo can remain tethered to you. So then you have this entity that's around. And apparently you have many more glitches where paranormal activity happened. So I could see that being quite logical. And I don't really think it's malicious, it's more of a trickster, a pranker. Again, something like I'd be if I was an echo. I'd love to mess around with people, not harmfully, but I want to have some fun. Just make them question reality a little bit. Keep them on their toes. I've started to narrate exclusive videos on my Patreon, focusing on fictional horror stories. I call these Sleepless Files. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, now you'll get some bonus content. I think it's pretty good. The most recent one is an observation made by the James Webb Space Telescope in deep space. Something was found that we never should have known about. Now on to the next story. Case file number 705, written by Alea Lacta Est 21. A phone booth, 3 ladies, and a weapon to my head. So this happened over 20 years ago, but only recently I came across a sub and decided to share. I never really knew or thought about a glitch, even though I've watched all of the Matrix movies. But let's get to the nitty-gritty. I lived in this very metropolitan city. The apartment building was on the right side at a T-junction, and I lived on the second floor with a huge window facing the street, right above the only gate in and out. Right in front of the gate, across the street, there was a phone booth. Yes, I used plenty of those back in the day. My then significant other lived in another state, and I would make a phone call in that booth every now and then. For that reason, my roommate and I had an agreement. Whenever one of us would use the phone booth, the other would stand guard at the window, just in case. On a random Friday night, around 11 p.m., I crossed the street for my call. As agreed, my friend was positioned by the window, looking out as usual. I made the call, and a few minutes into the call, a middle-aged man put a gun to my head. I still remember the gun and his physical features. The guy began to firmly say, "Come with me now, come with me now," while aggressively looking around to see if someone was coming. At that moment, I was cold-blooded enough, as usual, to tell my significant other, "Hey, I have an issue, I'll call you back." While saying that, I was assessing my options and thinking about what to do. It was so weird, it almost seemed like time stopped. Then I see 3 ladies coming in my direction, on the sidewalk, talking and laughing like nothing was happening. While contemplating whether to cross the street running to get to my gate, there was intense traffic. Lots of cars as usual on that street, even late at night. However, while I was looking at the cars on the street, the 3 ladies finally got to where I was standing and literally walked right past, right in the middle of myself and the guy, basically separating us from one another. All the while not acknowledging the situation, not even making eye contact of the man holding a gun to my head. At that opportunity, I ran for my dear life, zigzagging between the cars. It was a matter of seconds. I got to the gate and screamed to my friend, "Open the freaking gate!" For which he said, "Why?" When I looked to see if the guy was behind me or if I was going to get shot, I stopped in my tracks. The crazy street I just crossed was empty, eerily empty. The phones are also both empty. The guy with the gun, the 3 ladies, all gone. I went to the corner at the T-junction, looked to the left and to the right. Nothing. As if nothing ever happened. I got mad with my friend, and he said he was looking out the window, but there was this soccer game on TV. He got distracted, and for a brief time, right before it all happened, he looked away, and when he looked again, I'm already at the gate. I could never make sense of this, and while typing, I relived it again. The richness of the details didn't fade, not even a little bit. At the time, I thought I was going to be killed, and it was a miracle that saved me. Would it be a glitch? How? Just in case you wonder, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, and neither have I been under any strong prescription drugs. Case file number 706, written by Lisa Key, 25. 1,000 Ways to Die. This would be number 1,000,000. Hello everyone. I had an experience a week or so ago that I just can't stop thinking about. I'm hoping someone here can help me understand. So here it goes. Below is just a little background about me. I'm a registered nurse and I work night shift. I'm in my early 40s. I do 12-hour shifts, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I'll preface this by saying I was not tired at all. I've been a night shift nurse most of my nursing career and have no issues sleeping during the day. I was not tired when this happened. I work in a nursing home on the short-term rehab unit, so there's always a lot of admissions and discharges from my unit. When we get a new patient, it's the nurse's responsibility to take the diet order to the kitchen, so usually around 6 a.m. I'll print out and take any new diet orders the kitchen doesn't have. Now onto my experience. One night last week, I got 3 new patients, so I had printed out their diets. I had a little more charting to do, so I was at the computer finishing up all my tasks when all of a sudden I got this vision. I don't know what else to call it. In this vision, I saw myself walking through the halls heading to the kitchen holding the diet orders. All this is normal for what I always do. But then in this vision, I turned the corner to walk down the hall where the kitchen is, and I saw myself have a freak accident. I saw a ceiling tile fall on me in just the right way that it split my head open, and there was blood everywhere, and I was lying on the floor and died. It was like I had just watched a short excerpt of a movie, but it was of me dying. The vision only lasted a couple of seconds, but it totally freaked me out. It was like I was actually supposed to die at that exact time. My usual routine was thrown off though, because I was a bit behind due to finishing up some charting. I stopped charting and I was so confused at that vision. I've never had anything like that happen to me. The only thing close to that I've experienced is 90% of the time when I walk down a set of stairs, I can picture myself falling down them. I think I may have died in a past life falling down the stairs. I'm very sensitive and awake to a lot of things in this universe, still learning more and more every day. After the initial shell shock of trying to process what I just saw, the first thought that came to my mind was maybe that wasn't a vision, but it was a memory of how I just died, and me sitting at the computer was a place I was reset into in a different timeline, one closest to where I had just died in. This whole experience has really freaked me out. Was this a memory, a vision, a glitch, CERN? I just don't know, but I felt everything that happened in the vision. I've been trying to mentally take note of any changes in my life, even down to small details that happen. Things have definitely been off for me ever since they turned on the CERN machines a few weeks ago. If anyone can help me process all this, I'd appreciate it. I only told my boyfriend about this because the experience sounds so crazy to me, and I know I'm not crazy. To end this post, I'll reiterate I was not tired, I was wide awake and was at work. I don't drink or do any kind of drugs, and I'm not on any kind of medication. Case file number 707, written by Zerp242. I had a meeting with a non-human. I'm a project manager for a company I can't name. Today when I met with the account manager for a vendor we may bring onto the project, something was just off. He was young, maybe late 30s, looks as if he had a stroke in the past, but that wasn't it. There was something about him. His mouth smiled too big. His teeth looked huge. His head was so long, almost unnaturally long. In fact, everything about him wasn't quite right. It sounds like I'm being insensitive, and I'm guilty about feeling this way. But when he started talking, everything just felt wrong. Alarm bells went off in my head. This is not human. You have to get out of here. It was a normal freaking conversation, and I have had hundreds of meetings like this, with all kinds of shapes and sizes of humans. And I can't stop thinking about this one. What do you guys think? My brain glitching out? Has this happened to anyone else? Meeting someone you just feel like isn't human. Case notes for file 707. I had a meeting with a non-human. So this brings to light the halo effect, and in this case it would be the opposite, but for those who don't know, the halo effect is regarding our innate bias towards people who are beautiful, conventionally attractive people. We subconsciously have this effect in our brain going where, okay, well, they're beautiful, so they must be competent, they must be benevolent. Of course, this isn't true, but it is the innate reaction we have. It's all subconscious wiring. So this is very widely known in court cases, actually. Juries have a bias towards innately beautiful people, and they're much more likely to rule in their favor. Also applies in business and virtually every aspect of life, dating of course. So in this case it's the opposite, the reverse effect of this. It can be hard to trust them, even though it doesn't mean that they're bad people. You just don't know them. It's all innate instinct. In your case, your instinct was that they were not presently human. I've had personal encounters where I felt there was something off, but I've never felt like someone wasn't human. Maybe robotic. I mean, there's all kinds of memes about Mark Zuckerberg, but let's say for the story's sake that this was indeed not a human. What would their motive be to impersonate someone? Would it be a skinwalker or an alien? You did say that you work for a company that you can't name. Now, maybe you just want to be anonymous, or maybe the company you work for has important state secrets. Maybe it's a defense company, defense contractor. Maybe this person that you're meeting is trying to get into business with you because there's sensitive details and information that they could procure from it. But if it is an impersonation of a human being, there has to be a motive. No entity would just do that randomly. Case file number 708. Written by Sarah Vivian. A plainly alien glitch. I don't know if this was a UFO alien experience or what to make of it. I'm at a loss for explanation and words. I feel so fumbled and speechless. Some info. Due to a spine injury, I deal with a lot of body pain, especially at night, which has recently caused me to wake up multiple times from my sleep. This hasn't been much of an issue until recently. Sure, I have dealt with insomnia for years, but I didn't go through periods of waking up at a specific time every night for 2 weeks straight like it's been lately. Nearly every single night between 2:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., I've been waking up for no apparent reason. I just woke up very alert. A lot of the times this was occurring, I wasn't waking up in particular from my body pain or any sound, etc., just awake without reason. It's not a normal habit for me to go check the clock when I wake up from insomnia, but for no known reason, every time I would wake up during this 2-week duration, almost immediately I would get up and walk to the kitchen to see what time it was. During this, I didn't think about how strange that was till much later after the stop. Anyways, so last night again, for no real apparent reason, I got up out of bed, went to the kitchen to see the time, which was 3 a.m. Then I headed back to my room and got on my bed. The window was cracked. This is important. So I get under the covers and start to doze off when literally out of nowhere, I hear a very loud sound of an airplane. I do not live near or on a flight path. The airport is a good 15 to 20 minute drive from my location, but I didn't think much of the airplane sounds at first. I'd like to add that I have lived in this apartment for almost 2 years and have never heard airplanes at night. I've seen a jet once during the day, but that was about it. I would also like to mention I used to live in these same apartments, different units, in my teens and never experienced this. Nor do I remember ever seeing planes come near this area during the day in my teens or now. Anyways, I'm drifting in but not yet asleep. 5 minutes or more had passed at this point, and I could still sharply hear the airplane as though it was hovering directly above my apartment. I'm in a downstairs unit, by the way. It mentally hit me that the airplane should have passed by now. My eyes opened. I physically rose up from my bed and peered out the window knowing, yeah, I probably won't see anything from here, but I guess it was just a natural reflex to look where you hear a sound. Of course, I saw nothing from my obscure view, but I still could hear the airplane right outside. Just there. No sound of it moving away. I thought how strange this was and wondered how it would be possible to keep a plane in place like that, and started to get out of bed to go outside and see it, when I suddenly became extremely tired. I felt dazed, and then all of a sudden the plane just abruptly stopped. No fade out, no sound of it moving at all, just nothing. I thought that was very weird, but it was like whenever I tried to think about how strange all this was, my thought process went blurry, as though I couldn't form logical thoughts about it anymore. Then suddenly, the side of my left calf began to itch intensely. Now, this is where everything gets really freaky. I'd like to note that I do not get zits on my legs. I rarely deal with acne as it is, and I don't recall a time I've ever had a full-fledged whitehead on my legs. However, when I went to scratch, I felt and counted 5 large and hard bumps that felt like zits. The bumps were so hard they almost felt like rocks beneath my skin. What was also unusual about them is the skin on top of them felt very cold, colder than the rest of my leg. I distinctly remember nonchalantly tracing them with my fingertip. Even in my dazed state, there was a mental alert, like my brain was telling me, "Hey, that's weird. What are those doing there?" But I felt very calm, unusually calm about it, as I was becoming exceedingly tired by the second, which is also unusual for me. I said something like, "Oh, they must be zits," and immediately blacked out. I don't even remember getting back under the covers. This is not my usual behavior. If I notice or feel something weird on my body, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to examine it. In no way would I ever be comfortable passing off something abnormal like quarter-size hard zits on my legs so easily, especially 5 of them. But it was as if someone dosed me with chloroform. I passed out cold before I was able to get up and turn on a light to see it better. These were not insect bites, and were not there before I went to bed. When I woke up this morning, I found what appears to be a cat scratch on my left index finger. Here's the problem with this. I don't have a cat. Haven't seen or played with a cat in a while. My nails are short and dull, and I certainly wouldn't be able to make such marks. After being awake for a few minutes, the previous events came rushing at me like a train. Panic set in, my mind racing to see what the actual hell the bumps were. But to my horror and shock, all but one abnormal bump was there. It was smaller, not as hard as the ones I had previously felt. It didn't look like a bite or a zit, just a strange red bump, still colder than the rest of the area. I sank in my chair, racking my brain trying to fathom what happened and how those bumps disappeared. I did not dream of this. I had gotten up physically out of my bed twice right before feeling the bumps. There is no way I imagined this. I don't know what happened. Less than an hour later, after seeing the first bump and showing it to my mom, it vanished. It's no longer there. I've never seen a bite or a large zit just disappear that quickly without any trace. Since this experience, I have been hearing planes almost every night, and it's always between 2 to 3 a.m. I haven't heard any hover or idle as long as the first time, but I definitely hear the planes lingering quite a while. One night recently, I heard what sounded like 3 planes extremely close going, back and forth in the same area, getting louder, then fading out, then loud again as if it was right above the apartments. Every single time I've gotten up out of bed to go look, I suddenly get hit with extreme tiredness and fall asleep instantly, unable to make it out of my room to go out of the front door to see what is going on. Again, this is unusual. It's now July 16th, 2022, and since late December 2021, I haven't heard the plane sounds, that or the aliens wipe my memory of it. I've thought a lot about the plane sounds. If these were actual planes, why have they suddenly and completely stopped? A few times though, I have had bouts of waking up between 2:30 to 3 a.m., walking to the kitchen to see the time and walking back. What is so strange about this trance is my phone is always on my nightstand next to me. There have been times where I wake up feeling that familiar urge to get out of bed to go to the kitchen, but remember, just look at your phone. And yet, even when I think of that and do look at my phone, something in me still gets me up to go to the kitchen. It almost feels as instinctive as going to the bathroom. I don't even care to see the time, I just want to sleep. I don't know why I keep doing this. It doesn't feel like it's completely my choice. Luckily, like I said, it has only happened a few more times since. Case notes for file 708, The Plainly Alien Glitch. So this raises a few questions I've always had about alien abductions. Obviously, I love aliens. The concept is fascinating. Beings that are equivalent to us or actually far beyond us in technology, visiting us and having questions. Did they spawn us? Did they create us? Did they seed the life on the planet? Are they purely studying us, having never interacted with us before finding us? A lot of questions. But regarding specific abductions, well, their level of technology, if they're able to reach us either from a different dimension or from travel through space-time, where the distances between stars are so stupendously large, not to mention the navigational challenges to even know where you are in relation to where you came from. There are things we can't quite do yet, not for a long time. Which means that if these aliens are here, their level of technology is far beyond us, almost approaching what we would describe as magic. So given that, why are they not able to implant devices into us or experiment on us without us knowing? Why do they make their ships visible to us? Why, when we're abducted, do we still retain memory of it? Or, what I think happened in this case, I think you probably were abducted, but the aliens tried to scramble or erase those memories, but still your subconscious knows something is missing, there's a gap. So, these memories you have of waking up and checking the time is your brain trying to remind you that something happened at this moment. And also, hearing these planes, I think the planes are meant to be alien aircraft, but your brain is shifting it towards something you would understand. So it's not planes hovering, it's UFOs. The entire sequence, the entire story, to me, strikes me as your brain trying to reformulate a blocked memory into something that you can process and understand. And then, swinging back to the bumps on your skin, the 5 of them that suddenly vanished. Well again, if aliens have technology so advanced they can come here, presumably they'd be able to implant devices or experiment with certain substances that wouldn't cause reactions. So the fact that they don't do that, they don't even care if we know, at least not individually. I don't think they'll park their ship in downtown Manhattan anytime soon, but in the night, random individuals, not a big deal apparently. I would definitely check your body, and your leg in particular, and just see if you can detect anything implanted. There have been reports of people having devices of unknown origin and even having them examined, and the metal used is an alloy that we don't have on Earth. Now this doesn't mean it's aliens exactly, it could be some government experiment. That's always something I have to remind myself in these cases. Where yes, UFOs are real, there are unidentified aircraft out there. But maybe it's not aliens, maybe it is just our own governments spying on us with advanced technology that we don't even have access to or even can comprehend yet. That's possible. I hope it's actual aliens from another world, but maybe it's just our government.
Case file number 709, written by Mason Green 12. The Secret Shelf. I work at a retail store, and tonight I was on the mod team. We change out the price labels and move freight to a new location. We have these big carts that can hold shelves in case we need to add any to a new mod we're working on. Well, I only had one shelf on my cart, which is normal for me. After I finished one of the mods I was working on, I set off for the next mod, and as I was coming around a corner, I felt a bump, like I ran over something, even though the floor was completely clear of debris. When I felt the bump, I heard a sliding sound and then a loud thud. The shelf fell off the cart, no big deal. But when I picked it up and went to put it back in place, there was still a shelf in the exact spot as it was since my shift started. Now, I was working with this exact cart the entire shift. I swear there was only one shelf because the position that it was in there was no way there was one set above or below it. I know there wasn't one above because I was placing product on that shelf as I was working, and the product would not have sat properly on the shelf if there was another shelf above it, and had some big boxes under it that fit perfectly below, not leaving enough space for another shelf. I know this is something very small, and it isn't anything amazing that'll convince people of a glitch in the Matrix, but I now believe we're in a simulation. Case file number 710, written by Scarlet Rain. The moonlit silhouette of my daughter. This happened about 8 weeks ago. It was past bedtime and I could hear her awake in her bedroom, which she shares with her 4-year-old brother. This is not unusual and they're really cute when they play and chat at night, so no big deal, right? I walked up the stairs and I could hear their little chatting and giggles, so I decided to pop in and see if they needed anything and remind them in sleep time. I stepped over the safety gate, so I was inside their bedroom, but only about one step inside. The hall light was on and lit up their bedroom. My son is in the left bed and my daughter is in the right. I say something like, "What are you two up to?" And they sheepishly tell me they're playing. My eyes adjust and I can see my son in his bed and my daughter in hers. I can see them moving and getting comfortable as we chat. The light is low, but enough to see the shapes of them, the reflection in their eyes and their bedroom floor, which is a narrow gap between their beds. Small English council house. We chat for about 3 minutes and I asked them if they needed anything. I clearly hear my daughter's voice answering me from her bed. As we are talking, I feel something brush the back of my leg. I didn't even look to check because we have cats and those little devils follow me everywhere. One must have jumped over the safety gate and was coming to see if anything interesting was going on. Something felt a bit weird though, and after maybe 5 seconds I realized I hadn't heard the gate rattle as it always does when the cats jump over it. The cheeky little fur demon must have snuck in when I put them to bed, and that is probably why the kids are awake and giggling. I turn and look at the small gap expecting to see a little black cat. And I kid you not, my 2-year-old daughter is standing there in the gap. I was so shocked I said to her, "How did you get there?" And that little girl just starts giggling her little butt off, like hysterical giggling. I start nervously laughing. I say, "You were just in bed. Did you just teleport, little miss?" And we all start laughing. I am persistent and ask a few more times, "How did you get behind me?" But she doesn't answer me. She just keeps giggling sweetly. I asked her brother, "How did she do that?" And he just carries on laughing. I even say, "What is going on here? What are we all laughing about?" But neither can answer and I'm baffled. After a minute or two, I say something like, "All right, super baby, let's get back in bed." I tuck them back in and close the door behind me. I am still totally freaked out, but not scared or anything, just utter confusion. It felt like I had just looked up and the sky was green. Now, I had been looking at her in her bed. I was talking to her directly. I could hear her voice coming from her bed. I did not see her get out of bed. I did not see her walk towards me down the thin strip of floor space. I did not hear her footsteps on the floor. She didn't make a peep of noise. It was like she just appeared. I told my partner and together we tried to figure it out, but it felt like something impossible had happened. Eventually he just said, "Glitch?" And here I am. If you remember the layout of their bedroom, there are 2 beds, parallel to each other with a narrow gap in between. At the head of their beds is a window which overlooks the back garden. This other glitch happened not long after the first event, maybe 10 to 20 days later. It was close enough that the moment it happened, I instantly thought, "Not again," in a kind of acceptance way. It was long past bedtime for them, probably just after midnight. They had gone to bed on time and I hadn't heard a peep from them. I let my dog into the back garden to do her thing and I started walking down my garden to a chair we have at the far end. It was dark by this time, but the moon was out so I could see well enough. I got halfway down the garden and turned to look at my house and instinctively looked up to their window. The light of the moon was hitting the window in a way which made the glass look kinda white, even though their blinds were closed. But I didn't just see the blinds in the window. I saw my daughter's silhouette standing on the windowsill. I can remember it as clearly as anything, like a flashbulb memory. It was a completely black silhouette, her size and shape, hands up to the glass, and I couldn't make out any details or features. I recognized it was my daughter because of the size, but at this point I just knew there was a kid up there at the window and I ran like crap upstairs. I rushed into the room and flicked the main light on straight away. I had already started talking and blurted out a word like, "Hey," about to ask her what on earth she was doing, but I stopped in my tracks. Both the kids are in their beds. I figured she'd jump down quickly and was pretending to sleep. I actually walk up to her and try talking again, but this kid is fast asleep, seriously. If you've ever seen a young child in deep sleep, it isn't something they could fake. Slightly sweating, pink cheeks, sprawled out like a dead weight. I am so shocked now because I'm so certain of what I saw. I checked my son even though I knew it couldn't logically be him, but he is sleeping deeply too. I just back out of the room feeling pretty flabbergasted. This time I definitely got creeped out a bit, along with the familiar confusion and disbelief. I went back outside and checked. The window was lit up in the exact same way, only now there's no weird toddler silhouette looking back at me. Bonus file, written by Elena. I think I encountered death itself. It was 4 years ago. I live in a rural area. I was outside at night, taking my dog out to potty. We have a big sycamore tree in our front yard, and at the time we had a swing. I looked at the swing and noticed something on it. I froze in fear because what I saw was a dark figure, a figure so black it stood out in the darkness. It seemed to have a misty black aura around it. The darkness outside had a slight blue hue because the sun had set an hour beforehand. I could see it swinging, moving back and forth. All I could do was stand and watch. I wondered if my eyes were playing a trick on me somehow. It looked like it was the size of a teen boy. I grabbed my dog and ran back inside and turned the lights on, flooding the yard with light, and I ran back outside. The swing seat was still moving, but I saw no one on it. As I mentioned, I live in a rural area. My driveway is about 100 feet long. My neighbors are all old and in their 70s. I was only gone for a minute. I still questioned what I saw, but went back inside. Later that night, as I was falling asleep, I heard a man's voice ask me clear as day, "What would you do if your dad died?" All I could say was, "What? I don't know." I don't know how long I was asleep for, but I woke up to banging on my door. I wake up and hear my mother crying hard. I open the door and she says, "I think your father is dead." I ran to the room and he was. I went outside the next day at the same time and could tell the swing seat was empty despite it being dark outside. The image of the black figure is still engraved in my mind, and I remember the voice to this day. I think I encountered death. Case notes for the bonus file. I think I encountered death itself. Okay, so my first instinct here is that this wasn't death, it was some sort of malicious spirit intending to cause you emotional damage. And the reason for that is, well, what motivation would death have to appear to you in this way? He wasn't trying to safeguard your emotions because the warning didn't come early, like a month before your dad passed away, so you could at least brace for it. No, this was almost instantaneously, as soon as it happened, or even maybe after it happened. And then, appearing on the swing set, that would be odd. What motivation would death have to play with you in that way? Unless death itself likes swings? Maybe. But it also raises a question in my mind about the very concept of death and if it's a figure or just some force that manifests itself in the universe. If you think about it in the context of quantum immortality, where our consciousness is shifting between universes, and in this process, you need something to transport our consciousness between them. There's an actual manifestation in the universe that we view as death. Now, I don't know if it's a hooded figure with a scythe, but I think there is some entity out there that's responsible for this chauffeuring between universes. But I really like that idea, that viewing death as a chauffeur, not as a killer. Case file number 711, written by The Landlocked Mermaid, 88. They were going to buy us dragons. We were with our boyfriends. We were happy. They were going to buy us dragons. My sister and I were in our late 20s, white girls, and our boyfriends white boys of the same age. Angie, her boyfriend, RT, myself and boyfriend JC. For many years we would get together every weekend. I have a son who would come, but none of us could remember him there this particular weekend. It was snowing a lot. I remember just getting nestled in with Angie. The guys were heading out on their usual shopping trip. They did this every weekend, scouting out the dollar stores to buy us dragon figurines. Then all of a sudden, the loudest thunder I'd ever heard. Our boyfriends came running back in, having not yet made it to their car. The four of us had a brief discussion, all agreeing that thunder snow had happened. Although we all freaked out, we tried to put it out of our minds. Then they left. Angie and I continued with the same life. A much different, very messed up life. A couple of years later, Angie and RT got new friends. Angie and I always kept in touch though. There was a strain, a pause in our relationship for too many years. Our boyfriends ultimately betrayed both of us over the years. There are a lot of ways you can betray someone. After RT betrayed Angie, she kind of went into hiding. 20 plus years later, I was bringing over a pizza. I must say, pizza has a way of making things better. Her new boyfriend, Sid, answered the door. I basically held the pizza captive until she came out. It definitely renewed our bond. Angie and I most definitely agree that after the Thundersnow event, our lives got much harder. That those guys who came back were not our boyfriends. Glitches, alternate reality timelines, we just did not consider these as possibilities at the time. But looking back, we were with our boyfriends. We were so very happy. They were going to buy us dragons.
Case notes for file 711. They were going to buy us dragons. So I've never experienced thundersnow myself, but it sounds fascinating. I have seen lightning in the great distance during just driving at night with my family. This was so long ago, maybe 20 years ago. My uncle was visiting from the US and I was still in Canada with my mom. Anyways, just in the great distance you'd see lightning and it was snowing outside, which I thought was weird, but never heard any thunder. I actually did a bit of digging around, just Googling what this was about, and there's a news anchor that reacted to this, and I found it fascinating, his expression of pure awe, like never seeing this before. He was just reporting live, like a weather anchor, I guess, and this thundersnow event occurred, and it really is fascinating. It seems out of place, is the best way to put it. Now, as far as this event actually triggering some sort of universal crossover, I guess it's not inconceivable. We don't know exactly what triggers it. We know that death seems to transpose consciousnesses, so you'll die and go to a different universe. But did that happen here? There was thundersnow, so previously there was lightning, it hit you, and you're in another universe? But then, what about your friend? Now, maybe you're just assigning this event as some sort of mystical thing, when it was just an interesting event that happened, very rare, and you're assigning it more importance than it actually plays. I don't know. There's also another angle to this where lightning does create very strong EM fields for a very short amount of time. But even before or after, there's a charge in the atmosphere that you can feel. And I wonder if this charge has an effect on people's mindset, if you're around lightning all the time. There's actually a lake in Venezuela, Lake Maracaibo, where lightning is striking 300 times a night every single night and they don't know exactly what causes it. It's perpetual lightning, and I do wonder how much of an effect this has on people. It must have some effect.
Bonus file, written by Daedalus Waxwings. I have a little ghost girl in my house. I bought my first house 9 months ago. It's a huge accomplishment for me. In the evening after I closed on the house, I had a little champagne toast in a new place. I invited my boyfriend, my sister, we'll call her J, her 4-year-old daughter, we'll call her M, my best friend, Aunt T, and my son and brother, who live with me. It only lasted an hour or two. I gave everyone the tour. My best friend and Jay wanted to stop in every room and talk about my plans for it. I ordered pizza. We had a champagne toast. My niece, M, had a great time running through the house. She and my sister have a 700 square foot apartment, so my place seemed huge to her. M loved my room. I have a closet in my room with a built-in pedestal kind of thing, so we sat her on it and joked that it could be her room. All in all, it was a good time. Everyone, who didn't live there, headed out around the same time, starting with J and M. It was a school night. Not even 5 minutes after J and M left, my sister calls me, still driving home. My sister sounded shaken, and I was worried for a second that her car broke down or she got into an accident, but no. J says she asked M if she had a good time and if she liked Aunt Daedalus Waxwing's new place. M says, "Yeah, I had fun with Aunt Daedalus, Aunt T, and the little girl." My sister said she actually pumped the brakes on the car because her instinct was to stop the car in its tracks. There were no other children in the house that night, just M. Jay is trying not to scare M, but she wants to know more, so she gently asks, "Oh, what little girl?" M says, "The one that was standing behind Aunt Daedalus all night." My sister presses her a little more and asks M what the little girl looks like. M says she has long black hair and she had on a pretty blue dress. My sister asked if the little girl spoke to her. M says no. She was shy, but she had fun chasing each other throughout the house, and the little girl was sitting in her house, aka my closet, when we opened the door. M hesitated to walk into the closet at first, and I didn't know why. Now I know why. Apparently, I have a little ghost girl in my house. She likes my closet and me. My house was built in the 1900s, so it has a long history, but I haven't really looked into it yet. I have not seen or heard a thing in this house since I moved in, but did not sleep well for the first few nights after hearing this. Case file number 712, written by R32 fan, of a mighty pen and an album. A few days ago, I was studying Japanese and I dropped my pen. No big deal, it happens. I go to pick it up and I realize it isn't around me. I definitely heard it hit the carpet, so it should have been around the bottom of my desk or under the chair. I look around my room and I can't see it anywhere. I get up and walk into the next room to grab another pen, but the pen I dropped is lying on the floor there, in that room. This room is across the hall, around 4 to 5 meters away from my room. It shouldn't have been there at all. I know it was the same pen because I only have one pen that's shaped like a JNR C62 steam locomotive. Also, another thing happened to me yesterday. I had just finished listening to a Judas Priest album on vinyl and was putting it away. I placed it in front of the Diamond Head album and went through into the album repository, as I like to call it. It's literally just a library full of albums, and pick out The Great Radio Controversy, an album by Tesla. I walk back to the record player, put the Tesla album on, and go back to my sofa. I sit down and look towards the record player and notice that against the cabinet where I put the Judas Priest album, there is now a Diamond Head's Borrowed Time rather than said Judas Priest album. I looked through all of the albums that were there, but I couldn't find it. The only albums that were the ones that were there before, the Diamond Head, Cannibal Corpse, and Sepultura. I don't listen to that heavy stuff. I just had a few friends around a few days earlier and they're into that stuff. The Judas Priest album showed up in the most stupid place, in between the Gary Moore albums. I definitely didn't put it there, meaning there is no other explanation other than teleportation or some kind of poltergeist. Case notes for file 712, The Mighty Pen and the album. Strike it up for another solid DOP event. But this one's a bit interesting with the carpet, because when you think about it, when you're dropping an object, sometimes it'll bounce. It'll hit at just an angle where the physics play into it to propel the object way further than you think possible. And so that's what a lot of people will think when they hear about disappearing object phenomena, especially when it's a dropped object. Well, it just bounced somewhere and you can't find it. It went under the dresser or the bed or in some place you're just not seeing, maybe playing on the angles of objects. But if it's carpet, well, it's not going to bounce very far no matter what. And in this case, it's through another room, and you only have one pen that looks very unique. So, yeah. And then there's the album. Well, whatever it is, maybe it is a poltergeist, that's conceivable. Or it's just the cross-dimensional entities, and maybe they just didn't like Judas Priest, so they returned it expediently. Case file number 713, written by SS Destiel. When everyone remembers your mother dying, not your father. I work in the admitting department of my local hospital, and I also help the business office with miscellaneous billing duties. One of the things I do is keep track of obituaries. When someone's obituary appears in the newspaper, I check to see if they still owe the hospital money. If they do, I clip the obit, fill out a form, and then keep track of how their insurance pays and whatnot. A few years ago, I've worked there 20 plus years. One of my coworkers in the dietary department retired and passed away soon after. I know because I processed her obituary. This coworker's daughter was really good friends with my cousin, so the daughter was even over at my cousin's house the day after my coworker's funeral. They had a big wake for her mother and everything. Today, as I'm working ER registration, the daughter comes in and says her mom is in the ER. I was brought up short. I thought, what? I didn't say anything for a moment, so my office mate had to step in for me and look up this lady's mother. Sure as hell, it's the mother who died years ago. My office mate lets the daughter back into the ER to see her mom, and I am unable to find the obit form I filled out. I heard back from my cousin, and he's as weirded out as I am. Coworker's daughter has no memory of the wake or anything, but she said she's been getting this stuff from the people around her for the past few days. People remember her mom dying, even funeral details and the like, but a coworker's daughter doesn't remember any of it. Plus, her mom is right there. It's freaky. Spoke with my cousin instead of texting him. Coworker's daughter said it was her dad that died and not her mom. But she also said that's not the way any of the people who run into her remember it. They're asking where her dad is, how he is today. He's not answering his phone or texts, etc. And to her, the man has been dead over 10 years. I've been asked if I had any close calls or moments where I couldn't slip from one universe to another, and yes, there was one. It was a little over 2 years ago. I was getting my evening medications together, but I was tired and screwed them up. I ended up taking the entire full bottle of glipizide, which is a medication that lowers your blood sugar. I accidentally took enough to kill a horse. I realized it right as I laid down for a nap due to extreme exhaustion, and I felt really weird going to sleep. Looking back on it, I think I fell asleep forever, there, and woke up here. Case notes for file 713. My father died, not my mother. So there's evidence here that points to two different types of glitches, but they don't quite add up together. So when you overconsumed glipizide, I think is what you called it, the medication that controls your blood sugar, if you took enough to kill a horse, then I don't see how you would have survived. More likely you did indeed die and were transposed to a different universe. If this happened, it would explain you remembering something that didn't happen, but it wouldn't explain how so many people in your coworker's daughter's life also misremember it. Why do so many people think it was her mother that died and not her father? If it's simply a glitch of quantum immortality, you're in a different universe and something is different, well, it wouldn't reflect in this way where other people are also misremembering. It's like a localized, regional Mandela effect in real time. And I don't know what would cause that. But it does make me think, what if quantum immortality, when we die, what if people nearby to us, people we're connected with, if they die in a similar time frame, maybe their consciousnesses go to the same new alternate universe that you go to. I wonder who decides this. Is it some sort of programming within the universe? Or are there server mods that look at who are dying and they compare them to their family tree, their friends, people that are close, and those people that are close, if they die, they go to the same new universe as the first person. It would make some degree of sense to keep people connected, keeping those bonds alive. Bonus file, written by RichieFingers99. We all need to be reminded to love. A few weeks after my dad died, I woke up one night and he was standing at the foot of my bed. He didn't move or speak, he just stood there with a little smile. I was obviously surprised and still half asleep, so my response was, "What are you doing here? You're dead." I realize this sounds like an odd thing to say to a recently deceased parent, but my dad and I were best friends and shared a sense of humor where we could never offend each other. He worshipped the ground I walked on, and I his. We loved each other completely. If I'd said that to him while alive, I'd have gotten a big laugh in response. I sat there looking at him for a minute, confused, thinking, nah, this is all just a dream, and then laid down and went back to sleep. The following afternoon, I got a call from my sister. I could tell straight away from the cracked tone in her voice that it wasn't just a random call. I almost knew why she was calling. We exchanged pleasantries and then I say, "I dreamt about Dad last night." Without hesitation, she replies, "He came to see you too, didn't he?" She'd had the exact same dream. She woke up and he was standing at the foot of her bed with a cheeky little smile on his face. A few years earlier, my mom had died from cancer and I wasn't taking it very well. I was 19 at the time and spiraling. I'd randomly started crying and was struggling to cope. I'd often hold it in during the day and wait for my girlfriend to go to bed before having a little cry by myself on the sofa. So I'm sitting there on the sofa one night, head on my knees looking down at the floor quietly sobbing when I assumed my girlfriend was walking in the room. It was near Christmas and we'd been wrapping presents, so there was wrapping paper on the floor. She stood next to me on top of the wrapping paper, making a crinkling noise and put her hand on the back of my head. I wipe the tears away and say, "I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm coming to bed. Then I look up, and there's nobody there. My girlfriend was still sound asleep in the next room. God, I miss them. If you're lucky enough to have parents that are still alive, cherish every last second with them. I didn't realize in writing this that I'd have to relive the emotions I felt at the time. I've shed a few tears tonight. As the years pass, I suppose we all just get on with life and try to ignore the things that cause us pain. We have to, I guess. I'd forgotten how much I missed them and what wonderful people they were. It's good to be reminded. Bonus file, written by Armored Meerkat. The ghost of my husband saved my life. The ghost of my husband saved my life. My husband passed away suddenly in 2006, in January. I was cooped up, coping with my loss most of the spring and summer. My friends told me to take some time off and have a road trip. I agreed. I decided to drive from Michigan to Chicago. I started to arrange hotels, look up routes, and so on. There were no smartphones and DLS was just catching on. Anytime I tried to check hotels, my modem died on me and had to be reset. I became frustrated and yelled, "Don't you dare mess with my car." The day before the trip, I was getting ready to go to work and was at the door when I heard a loud boom. The area was not the best neighborhood, so I assumed it was a gunshot or a car backfired. I got into my car and pulled out of the driveway. Suddenly, I hear the dreaded flecka flecka sound of a flat tire. I have no spare tire, so I had to call a friend to ask for a ride to work. Later that afternoon, I took the flat tire to get a new one. When the mechanic looked at the tire, he told me that I was very lucky. It was totally worn out, but it was not visible from the outside. If I would have gotten on the road with that tire, I might not have made it back alive. When I got back home, I thanked my husband's spirit for saving my life. I now have a Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel, please feel free. Now on to the next story. Case file number 714, written by Karen's Wine. Everyone knows me in this town that I don't live in. Today, I went into a town in a state that I don't live in. I'm here, in the state, working for the summer, and my job takes place in a town 2 hours away from this one. So I'm in this faraway town, and the first thing I do is go to a coffee shop, one I've been to maybe once before today, but over 2 years ago. I order my food, order my drink, pay in cash, and then get handed my drink at the counter before I take my number and sit down. I didn't notice until I'm at the table that my cup had my name written on it, but I never mentioned it to the barista. She never asked. I brush it off and go about my day. I spend the day in this town and end the night by going to a local bar with a couple of my friends. I have never been to this bar. I never usually stay late in these faraway towns because I usually work early the next day. As we're walking to the car, a homeless man on the sidewalk calls out my name, nothing else. My friends explicitly heard my name as well. My name doesn't rhyme with anything. I can't think of anything that remotely sounds like it. I don't think I'll be sleeping tonight. Also, I only had one drink at the bar. One of my sober friends, the designated driver, also heard the homeless man say my name. I also went back and left my number with the morning shift barista. She said she'll give it to the one that served me yesterday. Maybe I'll get some answers. Case notes for file 714. Everyone knows me in a town I don't live in. So this reminds me of a story I narrated rather recently, maybe a month ago. It was actually the first story I went on camera to narrate my thoughts about. But it was this girl who, all her life, people were addressing her as a different name than her actual name. They were calling her Jennifer, if I recall. But her name didn't even start with a J, it didn't sound anything like Jennifer. Maybe you just have one of those presences or faces that looks like the name that everyone was calling you, and people just assume instinctively. Only the difference with this story is that they'd all be correct. But the thing is, how you write the story implies that it doesn't happen anywhere else, or at least it never has. Maybe it'll happen in other places. But my instinct is saying that that's not exactly what's happening here. Something else is going on. So what else could it be? I'm thinking universal crossover. I think often we're switching between realities without realizing it, because universes are so similar. I think we're constantly in a state of flux within the multiverse. It's not as stable as people assume. This is just my speculation, but I think it's correct. We're constantly crossing over into different universes and not realizing it until sometimes we do realize it because there's a difference in the universe you temporarily occupied. People knew you because you probably go there all the time. Maybe in that universe, on a more permanent basis, you're working nearby, so you go there all the time to that exact coffee place, the barista knew your name. One thing though, you were traveling with your friends, presumably, they don't live in that town, so you all crossed over to the same universe, where there's always fluctuations that we can't quite see or pinpoint. And we could definitely not try to predict it. It's pure chaos. Maybe there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just an aberration of how the universe works. Sort of like asking, why is gravity gravity? Or electromagnetism electromagnetism? They just are. At a certain point, that's just the answer. It just is. If you keep digging, there has to be at some point a ground level where you can't go any further. Because if you can keep digging infinitely, then there is no universal absolute truth. It's just that neither way is it satisfying, because there's always questions to ask and at some point it just can't be answered. As the great Philip K. Dick said, this is a cardboard universe. If you lean too long or too heavily on it, you fall through. I think we're constantly falling through. We just don't realize it.
Case file number 715, written by Kid No 1. My wife talking downstairs from work. I've had maybe 2 or 3 weird things happen in my life and thought it's finally time for me to share with you all. So this happened about 6 years ago. My wife was at work and wouldn't be home until around 11 at night. It was around 8 at night and I was finishing giving my 2 children a bath. I got my 3-year-old out first and brought her to my room to get her dressed. We were sort of chatting while I helped her put on her PJs when I heard something, and we both stopped and listened at the same time. It sounded like their mother, my wife of course, talking loudly to someone downstairs. I told her to stay in my room and I walked out into the hall and stood for a second. I could hear her clearly. It sounded like she was talking on the phone with someone. I walked to the stairs and noticed that it is completely dark downstairs, which is odd because my wife wouldn't be standing in the dark talking so loudly. So as I start down the stairs, the talking stops. I get to the bottom and listen for a second, but it is dead quiet. I check around and every light is still off and all doors locked. Nothing was out of place. So I went back upstairs into the bathroom and asked my son, who was still in the tub, if he had also heard someone talking just now. He said yes. I asked him who it sounded like and he said, "Mommy." I got him out of the tub and into my room. I call my wife, but she doesn't answer, so I tell the kids are sleeping in my bed with me tonight. Later around 11, my wife gets home, wakes me up asking why the kids are in our bed. I asked her if she had come home earlier and she says no, she was at work all night. I then told her what happened. We moved the kids to their beds and that was that. We lived in that house for 10 years and that was the one and only time something inexplicable happened. Case file number 716, written by Mushroom Cows, the most mysterious ham sandwich in the world. So I live in a flat with my mom and it's just the 2 of us. My mom has forgotten her work lunch in the past and one morning I woke up to find a ham bun in the fridge and texted her to see if she wanted me to bring any lunch into work. She said she had her lunch already. I didn't think too much of it and just carried on the rest of the day. 4 days later, this bun is still in the fridge. I take it to the living room and ask why she left it there for so long. The reason I was so sure it was hers is because it was squashed and my mom and I are the only 2 people I know that squash sandwiches before eating them, but not before putting them in our bags. Anyway, she denies it being her sandwich and tells me it's mine. Well, that would be a neat trick given that I'm vegan. It was a ham sandwich. I show her and then I harp on that the bun is cut in half and the sandwich bag is sealed. We never ever cut buns in half, we eat them whole and we always twist sandwich bags and never seal them. We then realize we've not had any buns for about a month and my mom's been using leftover roast chicken on her sandwiches, so there hasn't been any ham in the fridge for over a week. It was one of our sandwich bags, however, which is so odd.
We called up other family members and asked if they left it there. No one else had been in the flat at all for over a week though, and it belonged to no one. I am very concerned and also baffled. Bonus file. Written by Successful Register 25, Logan, the friendly puppeteer. I'm grieving. I lost my best friend yesterday. I can't stop crying. My cat got diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease a month ago. He fought hard, but you could see he was declining, even if he did his best to hide it away. So I took the difficult decision to help him cross into that rainbow bridge before he felt the pain that was getting closer day by day. His kidneys were just cysts now. The vet came to my home and then he left this world while I held him like a baby on our bed. He just went to sleep. I went to have him cremated that same day, and as I came back with his remains, his brother started acting weird. My other cat started to do things only the one that left did, like pushing the water fountain before drinking. He also started playing like he used to play with Logan, my dear cat that left, but he was playing alone. I couldn't think much about it as I couldn't sleep that day in my house. I went to sleep with my best friend. She also has a cat. She woke me up at 3:26 a.m. so I could hear her cat being playful with something, as if there was another cat, but there was nothing there. Told me she's never done that before. My Logan passed at 3:20 p.m. approximately that day. Next day, I came home and I put on a movie my cat used to like. Whenever I put on that movie, he would come to see it with me. And then somehow my mouse moved, which was normal for Logan to do as he liked to sleep on that desk. I don't know if I'm going crazy, if his soul still doesn't understand what happened. I don't know, maybe I'm just grieving, seeing things. Have you ever felt something like this before? I wish it was him, not going to lie. Case file number 717, written by Dylan Roy. The town that doesn't exist. I live in very rural southern Appalachia, and yesterday I was going over to the next county to look at a lawn mower. It's an area I'm very familiar with, although I haven't been to the area in over a year. While on the way, I came upon a town that has never been there before. Now, there is a small community there, and it was by the same name, but this was a full-fledged small town. Had a couple red lights, a main street with probably 15 to 20 storefronts, everything. I was so taken aback, I stopped in the middle of the road. After a few moments, a car behind me honked the horn, so I pulled into a parallel spot and got out. The small towns in my area are all the same, tiny, dingy, run down. Had a heyday in the 50s and 60s, but all have fallen into disrepair. Not this one. Everything was pristine and new looking. Swept sidewalks, shiny windows, and clean brick. The people I saw were dressed in modern clothes and had the same appearance that most people in the area have. Healthy, but weather-beaten and aged beyond their years. The vehicles I saw were fairly modern, new to 20 years old. Nothing out of the ordinary. I walked into the little restaurant, Cream of the Crop Cafe, and it looked like every other little restaurant in the area. Booths and tables, a bar top with a register, and the kitchen behind it. Some cheesy James Dean and Marilyn Monroe pictures on the walls. I walked up to the girl at the counter and asked her where I was. She seemed puzzled because I could tell she knew I was local by my attire and my accent, but she said, "Minneapolis." I said, "So this is Minneapolis? When did they build all this?" Again, she looked puzzled and said, "I don't know, the 1800s sometime?" I couldn't handle it anymore, so I just left. Got in my truck and went on to look at the lawnmower. On my way back through, about an hour later, there was Minneapolis, like it should be. Just a couple houses and an old general store. No town, no red lights, no cafe, no sidewalks. Freaked me out something awful. I've never experienced something like this, as I'm pretty mundane and boring. It wasn't a hallucination, I don't think. Everything else was the same. It wasn't a dream, so I don't know. Case notes for file 717. The town that doesn't exist. There are plenty of instances where people are witnessing rooms and areas and even entire towns that simply don't exist in this universe. But in all these cases, they're momentary. Is it as simple to explain as a crossover event? Honestly, lately I'm beginning to think that these crossover events are very frequent, like we're in a superposition state of quantum flux between universes. And these changes, these fluctuations are happening very often. It's just that we don't notice it because the changes between universes are so tiny, and often there may not even be detectable changes, they could be subatomic. I also don't think this could be a time anomaly because you described that there are cars there that look modern. So it does sound like a different universe, not a glimpse into the past. It's just a reality where in that particular Appalachian Minneapolis, it's just more developed than in the current one. I was very curious, so I did a Google Maps scan of the area, assuming it's the town that is in North Carolina. If so, the development is very sparse indeed. There was a church that I saw, post office, just an inn, and some houses. There wasn't even a 4-lane crossing where traffic lights would be installed, and there definitely weren't any traffic lights anywhere. Moreover, I don't think you could possibly have confused this for a different town because it's a straight shot. There's only one road that's going through, and it leads up north, where even in that town, I don't think there was a cafe that I saw, and there's no traffic lights either. It is a bit more developed, with a general store and stuff like that, but there is no real development like you described. So no, I think this was a simple case of a crossover event. Temporary, and I wish I could tell you why it happens. I just think that it's happening very often, very frequently. If I had to give a gut instinct on how it happens, or at least when, it would be when we're in a lower state of consciousness, so dreaming or sleeping or very tired, where our consciousness isn't quite as rooted in and anchored in the current universe. That would be my guess.
Case file number 718, written by Blue Eyes 284, The Universe and Radio. 2 days ago, we were driving home from another country. We chose to drive at night to avoid the high temperatures and the traffic, but we only partially managed to do that because many others had the same bright idea. The highway was full of drivers in a rush, frantically changing lanes, speeding way above the limit, so all of this felt like a bad idea from the start. My husband, the driver, felt tired even before starting off at 9 p.m., and by 1 a.m. he felt even more tired. I tried to keep him talking and gave him coffee, but he had a few moments when it felt like we might need to stop. I felt alert and fine, but I've been sipping on an energy drink the whole trip. Around 2:30 a.m., we started talking about the attention wildlife sign. You know, the one with the deer running across lanes and trying to imagine what would happen if we hit anything at 140 kilometers an hour. He said that at one time I answered 304 to something he said, but I don't remember that. What I do remember is that around 2:54, a fox darted straight for our car, and I think we hit it. We were fine though. The next thing I remember is the clock showing 3:05 and my neck burning with pain, feeling hot and sticky and smelling blood. I panicked and turned on the lights, but there was nothing wrong. I had no signs on my neck, no bruises, nothing was different. The pain itself faded in 5 minutes, and so did the smell. I think I died and jumped dimensions at 3:04. I think we already hit a deer, and the fact I'm stupid enough to wear a seatbelt with its edge on the side of my neck because it feels weird on my boobs actually killed me. My husband doesn't remember anything weird happening. The kids were asleep the whole time, so as far as they are concerned, nothing happened. I know some of you will say I fell asleep after we talked about precisely this scenario, and that caused me to dream it vividly. The thing is, I can never sleep in a moving vehicle because I have car sickness, and closing my eyes will instantly make me sick. I have never fallen asleep in a car in my whole life. So what do you think happened? Oh, and I just remembered something else. When we were talking about the possibility of hitting an animal, my husband switched radio stations, and there was a remix of a 90s song I heard for the first time. I remember telling him that this is the first time in decades I heard this song, and that the radio station is the best. After the weird smell or pain thing happened, so about 15 minutes after, I noticed the radio was playing the same song on the same station, and I mentioned this to him, but he didn't understand what I meant by this and said he never heard the song before, and that he just switched the radio to that particular station randomly.
Case file number 719.
Written by Retribution, 1824. Ghostly Balls in the Sky. I think it was summer, about 1990. I lived in a small town in Pennsylvania.
A friend and I were heading to the next town over, and we were taking a shortcut on a rural road. There were a few houses on this road. We reached a stop sign, intending to turn right to head towards the main road. There was a house on our left. It was dark outside at the time, and we saw a strange pattern of lights above the house. We thought maybe they were having a get-together in the back, and what we were seeing was sort of dance light, like the ball in a dance club. Haze and fog aren't uncommon, so we thought the light was just hitting low-hanging fog. The light pattern was ghostly pale, not bright at all. It consisted of a central round light surrounded by smaller circular round balls, smaller than the center one. It was like 20 feet over the top of the house. The outer balls would rotate around the center, slow to a stop, converge towards the center ball, then return to their former position and begin to rotate again. We sat there for about 2 minutes, watching, debating what it was. The owner must have seen us sitting at the stop, and they turned the porch light on and opened the front door. We just left at that point. As we reached the main road, we saw the light moving across the sky. It was dim, and the mountain terrain made it difficult to keep it in sight. We saw it off in the distance, not at a very high altitude, but a fair distance from us. We eventually lost sight of it as the road ran downhill, and then never saw it again. To this day, I still have no idea what we saw. It didn't appear to be solid, but rather ghostly glowing balls. We told some friends what we saw, and of course we were laughed at. Still talk to my buddy. We're 1,200 miles apart now, but he remembers too. I'm not making any claims in the least, just saying I have no idea what it was. Case file number 720, written by Nine Tails. The Monster Electrician. This seriously happened to me last year. I was home alone. My 2 older brothers are always in our local church, which is just very near to us. It's like 1 street away. We also had no electricity. It was daytime, so we couldn't pay our bill on time. I was home alone. I'll have to admit I'm not in the church with my brothers because I'm too lazy when it comes to religions and things that need me to go out and talk to people. I would always choose to be home alone, back then. So yeah, I was home alone, no electricity, just using my phone, drawing stuff on my sketchbook, music, etc. My brother came home and he went straight to the bedroom. No word or anything at all. But it wasn't very fast. He walked very normally with a normal face. After a couple of hours, it was almost nighttime. We do have candles, but I couldn't find them. So I asked my brother, who still hasn't come out of his bedroom. He came out quickly and went outside to the house after he told me to follow him and fix the electricity. I was like, "What's your plan?" And he asked me to go get the screwdriver and pliers. He taught me how to get electricity back when it's cut off. He told me to cut this hanging thing. It was a lock for this electricity meter. It's a circle-shaped thing that's attached to a wall in every house that has electricity. He told me to remove the seal after the lock and pulled out the whole cover. This revealed a plastic chip that was in between this metal that's supposed to be in contact with the cover I just removed. So I removed that chip and put back the cover, and the lights went on, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's it? That was easy." Then my brother went straight back to the bedroom again. I received a call on my phone. "We're going to spend the night here. You should come over. We got electricity and food here." My brother said that. The one who's speaking on the phone. Of course I know his voice. I know my brother's voice. This voice. The one who just helped me fix our electricity here. I asked him, "Where are you?" He told me he's in the church. I said, "Stop. You're obviously joking. You're so lame." But I wanted to come over to his bedroom just to throw a pillow on him, but I realized I'm not even hearing any voice from his bedroom while I'm talking to him. He was talking normally. He was not being quiet. I could hear him inside, but there was no voice at all. I couldn't run. My legs turned so weak. I didn't even want to make any sounds at all. I slowly, slow as a nail, grabbed my pants and slowly walked out, while looking at every single corner. I was tearing up so bad, my lips were shaking while I was thinking, if this is a prank, goddamn, I'm such a piece of cake. But it was not. It was not a prank. I arrived at the church trembling, even crying the worst when I saw both of my brothers. They had never ever seen me cry like that before. I'm even crying while typing this out. It has got to be the most traumatic memory of my life because it's so inexplicable. I was with someone who was surely not human. That was not my brother. I talked to him. I followed his orders to fix our electricity. I freaking followed a non-human's command.
Case notes for file 720. The Monster Electrician. So the first thing that popped into my mind was actually Fight Club, the movie. Now, spoilers, but if you haven't seen it yet, come on, what are you doing? Go watch it. Where Tyler Durden was projecting a version of himself into the world as a hallucination. He was a split personality that was manifesting in the world, not really, but just in his mind. He wasn't aware that he was the one responsible for all the events of the film. Now, I don't think this exactly fits for this glitch. I don't think that was you, the doppelganger, just where my mind went. Because yeah, you certainly don't have that knowledge buried deep in your subconscious, or it would be a bit odd if you did. And I also agree it couldn't really be a prank because your brother, quote unquote, was in his room. And you would have heard him talking in the room, unless the room is soundproof, but given your description, it doesn't sound like it because you heard him just shuffling around in there. He was physically in there, but it wasn't him. So if that is a prank somehow, I don't know how, given he also was at the church when you went there later on. So I guess it's a doppelganger. It seems to be the most likely answer. Now, sometimes people try to explain doppelganger sightings as autoscopy, which is a medical/psychological condition where you see yourself outside your body. Not as a near-death event, but just seeing yourself outside your body from a different angle or perspective. And then you can see a double of yourself because it's just you seeing yourself. So people don't interact with themselves in these hallucinations or episodes. So given that, the only angle now is that, yeah, indeed, your brother was being impersonated by some entity. Now, when these events happen, I always question, what is the motive? If there's another entity involved, why would they be doing what they're doing? In any crime scenario, the very first thing investigators ask is, what was the motive? It seems reasonable that in these mysteries we should ask ourselves the same thing. What is the motive of these entities? They're not just pure chaos, maybe a poltergeist, but outside of that. What purpose would an entity have to help you restore electricity in your home? How does that help them? Perhaps it's a guardian angel. It's a bit trivial though, it seems, right? For such an event, just restoring electricity? Why would they bother? Maybe you need electricity for some challenge in the future. Maybe you just need to be prepared for it, and you needed electricity for that.
Creepy file number 40, written by Mega Weeb, the Disney World Predator. In Orlando, Florida, I was staying at a resort in Disney World. I was sitting outside on the steps of the courtyard, and a man approached me. We were the only two people in the vicinity. The man did not look like a resort guest. I stood up and he began to talk to me. He asked me what my name was, and me being on the spot, I stupidly told him. He smiled creepily. He asked how long I was staying there. I told him I didn't know. He continued on to talk to me, making me more and more uncomfortable. I just wanted to go back to my room and hide. I wasn't giving him any detailed answers when responding to his questions, but when I'm on the spot like that and someone I don't know asks me a question, I answer somewhat truthfully. I really don't want to answer truthfully, but it just comes out. I'd say it's probably due to anxiety. I wish I wasn't so honest to random people. It's dangerous. If I were to hightail out of there, he probably would have been able to catch me. The man had graying hair. He was tall and muscular. He did not look attractive at all. His questions kept getting weirder, like, are your parents here? And, what room are you staying in? Dusk began to fall. So many red flags. I'm quite a shy person with people I don't know anything about. I tend to give them one-word answers if they ask me any questions. At this point, I wanted to leave very badly. The man got real close and stared into my eyes, making me even more afraid. He was close enough to grab me. Just then, the door leading to the courtyard opened. I feel scared now. I turned, expecting to see one of the man's friends, but in fact it was the opposite. It was my amazing great uncle. Out of all the people staying at the resort, my great uncle came out of that door. I was saved. The man smiled at him, an unsettling smile. My great uncle knew something was up, and so he told me that my parents needed me for something, and that I should come with him, and so I did. My uncle held out his hand, and I took it, walking past the creepy man. I shivered as I noticed his eyes following me. My great uncle asked if I was okay. I told him I was a bit scared. My great uncle asked who that man was. I told him I didn't know. We were headed to my grandma's room, through the vast courtyard. We walked hand in hand on the sidewalk that led to more of the rooms. I kept looking over my shoulder. The man was still standing at the steps, looking at me and smiling. I believe that my uncle knew what the man's intentions were, as did I. The man was probably falling for me. In other words, he possibly was a diddler. I am so grateful that my uncle was there to save me. This happened on my winter break. I was 17 and I still am. I still think about what happened to this day and shiver at the thought of being diddled. I mean, who doesn't? When we got to my grandma's room, I told my parents everything. They were relieved that I was safe and unharmed. Case file number 721. Written by Ayumi-san, 2006. A special kind of table repair service. Sounds silly, but this freaked me out this morning. About 3 years ago, my cousin, who runs a resale shop, posted that she had some random things for free on her porch. One of these items was a blue kid-size fold-out table. These aren't exactly cheap, and I remembered my grandma having one as the kids' table at family reunions when I was a child. Nostalgia made me feel like I should pick it up for my own kids and their cousins, for when I host dinners on holidays and so on. The reason it was free was because there was a decent-sized tear in the middle of the leather top. I figured I could just throw a small sheet or tablecloth on it and all would be well. I used it multiple times later, but I was continually annoyed that the ridges of the tear would make anything I placed in the middle of the table tip over or spill. While the virus was a big thing, I decided to fold up the table and store it in the garage since we likely wouldn't be having any get-togethers. Not in the foreseeable future anyways. Flash forward to last night. I went to the garage to get some meat from the deep freeze and happened to see this table in the corner. I remembered that I bought some fancy duct tape from Hobby Lobby that was pretty multicolored mushrooms all over it. I made a mental note to possibly repair the rip in the morning with this tape after cleaning the table up. After all, that would be less tacky than plain gray duct tape. So this morning, I told my kids I would get it ready so they could paint pictures and watch cartoons. They were pretty stoked as they thought I'd gotten rid of this table. I pull it out to the kitchen and start wiping it down. Get to the top. There is no tear. None. I see a small indenture that appears like a tear, but it isn't even close to the 5-inch gash-sized rip I remember. I asked my husband if he maybe repaired it without my knowledge, even though that would be fairly evident if he had done so. He was also slightly bewildered and said he too remembered the tear, and no, he hadn't touched the table at all. I have a picture of the table from this morning, but I unfortunately don't have one with the tear. I know this seems really trivial, but I honestly can't make sense of the situation. Lucky me, I guess. Now my family can actually use this table on the regular. Case file number 722, written by Peace Love Callie. A giant pile of lost objects. I have always had odd, unlikely, and even seemingly impossible things happen to me. I dare not go into all of them, as I honestly believe something is attached to me, be it an angel with a sense of humor, plain old weird karma, energy, I don't know. I don't want to upset whatever it might be. I write this with no disrespect intended. This is just to tell you about the many items that I've had literally disappear, never to be seen again. Even today, every day, things are not where I leave them. I've learned I have to be very aware of where I put something. Maybe keys, glasses, my remote control. And still, when I look for it later, not only is it not where I put it, but I might find it under other things, like a shirt or piece of paper that I had not moved. That's my day-to-day. But I've had many items really disappear. I've only over the last couple of years become aware of the multiverse theory or given any real consideration to it. Maybe this is where they go? In the 1980s, I was going from the car to our condo with my husband and some family members. The parking spot we'd parked at was a mere 15 or so yards from our door, but at the time this happened, I'd walked at most 5 yards from the car. I took my giant wad of a keychain from the car and held it in my hand. As we all walked towards the condo, within a matter of seconds, I realized my keys were no longer in my hand. I asked everyone to stop and help me look for them. My husband had known I had my keys, so he assumed I'd dropped them somewhere. We all assumed that, although I knew it would have been impossible for me not to have heard a substantial clink if they dropped from my hand to the pavement, considering I had many keys and a lot of unnecessary metal keychains. There was only black pavement between the car and the condo, as I hadn't made it as far as a small grassy area. Everyone looked for about 20 minutes, including all through the car and the entire parking lot and grass, even though I hadn't been near the grass. Those keys never turned up. I had to have remade 3 car keys, house keys, mailbox key, and other random keys like those to my parents' house. None of my family would have taken my keys as a prank, never admitted to it, and let me spend all that hassle to replace everything. I couldn't replace the keychains. I lived there another 7 years and those keys were never found, not even by my neighbors. My husband and I lived near San Francisco. The Golden Gate Bridge was celebrating an anniversary which we attended. My husband bought me a really cool t-shirt commemorating the event, and I love that t-shirt. It was just the two of us. We got into the car and of course I had the shirt with me. I even opened it up and looked at it again in the car as we were driving home. It was dark by then and a little breezy, so we had all the car windows rolled up. We didn't stop anywhere between the bridge and home, but you know what I'm going to say. The shirt never made it to our home, and I never saw that t-shirt ever again. When we got home, it was not in the car anywhere. And even checking and rechecking the car over the next couple of years, it never turned back up. This also happened with a movie rental from a video store. I'd put the VHS into the car, and by the time I got to the video store, it was gone. It was exactly the same several years later with a rented video game. Also, I had a banana disappear once from a car, but no telltale smell of old banana ever appeared. It just wasn't there. Mysteriously, these are all car-related, even though they were all in different cars and over many different years. I've lost many other things that I know were in my house, that were just never located again, even after moving. Special things that I put in a special place just vanished. Of course, I've lost things that I can attribute to theft or human error, but most of these can't. Are all of these many lost things in a big pile together in some other reality or dimension? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Case notes for file 722, The Giant Pile of Lost Objects. So just recently I narrated a story about someone losing plenty of jewelry throughout their life. It disappeared, would reappear, and then disappear again. And I had postulated that this could be related to some sort of entity attached to them. I don't really like using the word haunting. I don't think that's descriptive. It carries too much negative connotations. It's a bit too heavy. More like a person of interest in supernatural affairs. For some reason, different people attract supernatural entities and events more than others. Kinda like a mosquito is attracted by a person's CO2 output and their pheromones, we have invisible lures, depending on what we're luring in. Be them bugs or something a bit more intense. There's just something about certain individuals that have a greater tether to out-of-phase beings. But about this glitch specifically, what astounds me more than anything else is the banana vanishing. Because for any other inanimate object that wouldn't degrade, at least not with an odor, you could always attribute it to somehow, unlikely, getting caught in an area that you can't access. Now, that in of itself is kind of a glitch, but you can sort of try to rationalize it away. But if it's something that would rot and produce unspeakable stench, well, there's no way around that. If the banana was there, and you know it was, and now it's just not, and you didn't eat it, you leave a banana in a hot car and the smell is going to be a mortal threat. You're going to need a biohazard team to deal with that. Total proof through a banana. Who would have guessed? Creepy file number 41. Written by Jedi Bo Jedi Prime 29. The eternal stare. I work in the public sector where basically we have books, but they're all free as long as you have a card, if you get it. And there are a lot of patrons who can be creepy. Some are disturbed or have mental issues, which is understandable as to why they are creepy, but it still doesn't help. Now, there's a guy I used to see sometimes when I'm working who just stares. He stares at people, anyone really. Tonight, he decided to stare at me, all shift. I only noticed a few times. This night, I saw that he had left for the bus stop after we closed. I left for the grocery store, hoping to avoid him. When I arrived at the shop, he was there. Now, he left early enough to get on 2 different buses before the one we both got on. At the stop, I sat down to just chill, and he paced the stop, staring at me still, unblinking the whole time. I'm a pretty big guy, so it takes a lot to creep me out. He accomplished this somehow in 2 minutes. He kept staring at me until I moved. I figured if I stood up, I'd be at a better angle to defend myself. He then took my seat. See, this bench has 2 spots. Instead of taking the unsat-in, empty spot on the right, he took my exact spot and continued to stare, following me with his eyes as I kept moving around, waiting for this damn bus to show. I, at one point, began moving back to my work for a better area. I would rather take the creepy people around there than him. Now, in reality, I wasn't really in immediate danger as I could easily have taken him, but I don't want to know what he could do. The LED sign of the bus crested the hill before the headlights, which gave me a sense of relief. That would be quickly diminished. Now this guy has stared at me before, but never got on the bus too. Tonight he had enough cash. This is when I knew he was following me. I began to head to the back of the bus. He still followed. I quickly changed directions and sat near the front. He weaseled his way to the front and quickly took a seat directly across from me. I know this because as I was nodding off, an intense instinct of, I'm in danger, took over, and my eyes shot open. There he was, ever unblinking, ever staring, ever creepy. Now this part is what has scared me for a bit. For a week and a bit, my bus service closed some major stops without thinking how it would impact anyone. Anyways, my closer to home stop is closed, so for a couple shifts I had to get off on the stop before. Complaints from the public quickly made the closer stop become available again. He must have not known this, but somehow he did know I got off at the farther stop. This stop is also super sketchy, with the streetlight being covered by trees, making this tiny strip of sidewalk basically blacked out for a bit. This man goes to get off at the stop before, looks behind and sees me still seated. I watch in horror as he goes to take his seat again. At that moment, I took my chance and hauled ass out of that bus. He stared at me angrily through the exit door as the bus pulled away. He tried to follow me off the bus, but it was too late. The road I am on is a straight road, so you have a clear line of sight to the next stop. My horror intensified when he did not get off at the next stop. I haven't seen him since, and I hope we never meet again. Case file number 723, written by Lady Greyzilla. My pregnant neighbor isn't the same person. I'm hesitant to tell this story. No one believes it, even my husband, who saw the whole thing. But here we go. My neighbors directly across the street from me, they're married and expecting a baby. The wife is a tiny blonde woman, very Caucasian, very tiny build. We wave to each other daily and yell salutations across the street. She goes into labor and they leave for the hospital. A week later, I see the car has returned, so I bake some cookies to take over and congratulate them. Another day or two goes by, and I see a thick, brunette lady outside with the baby, and I wave, assuming it's a relative that's come to help with the newborn. A few more days pass, and I see the husband outside with the brunette and the baby, so I take the cookies over. It's her. It's the wife? Same name, same personality, and the same demeanor, except now she's a thick, kinda tall brunette, Pacific Islander. The husband doesn't even acknowledge any difference. She talks to me and treats me the same way she always has, but it's a totally different physical person. My husband noticed as well. We even made some jokes about his wife swapping at the hospital. but since he can't wrap his brain around it, he starts to believe that she's always been this person, even though he clearly remembers her as teeny and blonde. I feel like everyone has lost their minds. It's been almost 2 years since that shift, and she's still a thick, tall brunette. And then I feel like maybe I have lost my mind. My only consolation is that my husband remembers it too, if only vaguely. I showed the picture I found of her to my husband last night. He's a little bit of a mess about it. The man is not a conspiracy guy, at all. But he remembered her. There's no denying that. He started asking some questions and tossing around ideas about what could have happened. I convinced him to go to the church this morning and attend their service. I spoke briefly with the pastor and said my neighbor had recommended that I attend. He was grateful she was sending people his way, even though, get this, she had not attended service since she had the baby. She apparently changed churches to one a little closer when she gave birth. So I don't know where to go next except for putting some feelers out in the neighborhood and finding an excuse to hang out with her. I spoke directly to my neighbor. I endured the heat all week and spent way too much on flowers to plant in an attempt to run into my neighbors. The old lady next door doesn't remember the neighbor's wife having blonde hair, but her middle-aged daughter does. She said, "Yeah, that was a couple years ago. I don't know why she went so dark. I thought it would wash her out." When I pointed out that it wouldn't wash her out because her complexion is tan now, she looked confused and said that maybe she had been tanning because she did look darker. I pushed it a little further and asked if she also seemed taller, but she seemed stuck on the fact that the very Caucasian blonde woman had gotten tan enough for such dark hair to look natural. She gave me several reasons, but didn't seem convinced either. I also spoke to the changed lady's next door neighbor and mentioned her having blonde hair before. Neither he nor his wife remember her ever being blonde. They both agreed she had dark hair even on move-in day. Yesterday, I finally cornered the changed neighbor lady outside. She pulled up with groceries and I offered to help carry them with her. I started talking about the church and how I had spoken with the pastor. She said some really nice stuff about the church, but also that she needed a church closer. That's why she switched. When I pointed out that her new church was actually further away, she said she had never actually measured it, but it seemed closer. I pointed out that her old church was in our town, and our new church is in the next town over, and she said the back roads must just make it seem shorter. Some red flags popped up here because the back roads around here are long and windy roads that circle around our town and pass by all the farmland. It doesn't ever make things go quicker. It's a nicer drive, sure, but it always adds a good chunk of drive time. Also, the new church is in the middle of the town, 2 streets over from Main Street, so if you take the back roads, you actually have to circle back to get on the main roads to get onto it anyway. It would have been much more convenient to take a direct route using the town roads that connect the 2 towns. It's almost a straight shot from the middle of our town to the next town over. I don't know why that bothered me so much, but it did. After a little while of small talk, I brought up the hair. I said that I was trying to go blonde to hide some gray that I have coming in, and did she have any tips? She laughed and said the last time she was blonde she was in high school, and it was a mess, so she didn't recommend it. I pointed out that she was blonde right before having her baby, and she got really weird, almost defensive, and said she hadn't. She had only tried to go blonde that one time in high school and it turned orange, so she dyed it back immediately. I told her I chalked it up to pregnancy because she was definitely blonde while she was pregnant. She ended the conversation shortly after and thanked me for my help, but you could tell she was annoyed with me. So guys, not super sure what I've learned other than the girl next door to me, the old lady's daughter, and I are going to have another chat. She made me feel like she remembered, but she couldn't wrap her head around it. I'm gonna go back to the church on Sunday to poke around and talk to some other people. Maybe I can dig up some more. Case notes for file 723. My pregnant neighbor isn't the same person. So while reading this, my mind kept going towards witness protection. There was like an alarm bell going off in my head. This must be WITSEC. But there are flaws with this theory. The first, of course, is I've never heard of WITSEC placing a single individual into a new family, or relocating a single individual and then replacing her with, an actor? I suppose it's not inconceivable, especially if there's a large monetary reward for the other person that's just impersonating them. It doesn't seem sustainable to me. But I suppose for a temporary small amount of time it could be possible. But if we're talking years here, I don't know. Doesn't seem quite right, does it? There is a small thing that does support this, though, in that when you confronted the neighbor about her having blonde hair while being pregnant, she got defensive. That seems strange. It seems something to sort of laugh at, not get defensive over, unless you're actually guarding something very important and the secret is getting close to being discovered because of these questions. That does lend towards the idea. Now, if it is Witzek, why do half the people you talk to, including your husband, remember her as the old way, at least in part, maybe hair color being different, but not exactly all the details of her size and everything, skin color. But then the other half don't remember her being different at all. They always remember her being as this tall brunette. It's conceivable that this is just attributable to neighbors not really paying attention to each other anymore. I know in the past they did, but these days, I don't really notice my neighbors all that much. I couldn't tell you what they look like. So it's possible it's just absent-mindedness from the other neighbors not paying attention. Now, assuming it's not Witzek, what else could it be? For the same reasons, I don't think it's quantum immortality, because people remember her, at least have to, as she was before. And it's not like half the neighborhood went through quantum immortality and were transposed to the same new universe. Plus, you actually have a picture of how she was before. You have physical proof, which wouldn't move with you if you did die and go to a new universe. So that can't be it. Dare I say aliens? Somehow, for some reason, impersonating this specific lady, and then trying to alter the memories of other people, but it's only halfway successful? And of course, they didn't remove the picture you had. To be fair though, as much as I like the idea of aliens, it doesn't really make any sense. What would be the motive? It's a bit of a stretch. To be honest, I'm stumped here. It's just a good story.
Case file number 724. Written by Alarmed Fan 4932. The Tandem Teleportation Incident. My apologies if this doesn't quite make sense, but I'm freaked out and I have no idea how to explain this. My coworker and I were driving back from our dinner to the place we were staying at. We had driven this route a handful of times, and we were very familiar with the surrounding area. It was a 7-minute drive from the restaurant to where we were staying. Okay, so we left the restaurant and had a straight drive for about 2 miles, no turns until we had to take a right turn into the parking area of the property we were staying at. As we approached the hotel, the tall "Courtyard by Marriott" sign was visible, as was the building. We were a block away from the turn, and then we suddenly just weren't. We were all of a sudden driving on a highway, about to take the exit on the right. It was immediately apparent, and I said to my coworker, "Wait, something is wrong here." And he replied, "Yeah, what the hell just happened? We were just about to turn into the parking area." I told him to pull over, and I looked up on maps where we were. The map showed we were 20 minutes away, in the opposite way we had come from. It was physically impossible, and the time on the clock was still the same as it was when we were next to the hotel. I don't understand, and neither does he, and he doesn't want to tell anyone because it sounds just so crazy. We genuinely teleported 20 minutes away, and it's the same time. It was the single most disorienting feeling I have ever experienced. But now, after that, I feel like everyone in my life has just changed. Everyone feels so distant. I can't shake the feeling that something is still really very off. Please help if you can. Case file number 725. Written by, I don't know, the second pair of perfect jeans. We all have that favorite pair of jeans. You know the one I'm talking about. They fit perfectly and are the first thing you wear after a laundry day. Last time I was in Miami, I found mine. They make my butt look amazing and fit like a glove. I literally love them and hate myself for not getting two when I found them. I just got back home from a long trip, and of course I wore them on my flight back. Yesterday, I did laundry, and this morning I was excited to wear them. I went out to run some errands, and after getting back, I was looking for something when I found a pair of jeans thrown in one of the cabinets. I thought it was weird because I remembered putting them on this morning.
That's when I looked down and saw I was wearing the same pair of jeans. The weird thing is that they are identical. Same brand, same size, same shade, and they're even folded the same way I would. That's what freaked me out. See, I never used to fold my pants, but on this trip I found a pair of flats and decided to fold my jeans to see how they would look, and since it looked good, I just left them like that. So now I have 2 pairs of my favorite jeans, and while it's still very strange, I'm not going to complain. It's just odd. Where did they come from? Creepy File number 42. Written by Ribodat Kid. The Lightbulb Intruder. Hi everyone. I've been in my family's new house alone for a few weeks now. My family moved here about 3 weeks ago. It's a really cool house. It's pretty spacious for where it's at. It's got cool features like super nice Wi-Fi, a pool with a slide, and a door system with a passcode lock. It's by far the coolest house I've ever lived in. Anyways, I haven't had a lot of irrational fear in my life. I believe in ghosts and spirits, but I've never had first-hand encounters with them. I think most stories people tell aren't real, and I wonder if mine even is. I don't know if it is, but I figured I would share some details. The first night I got here, I had to take a 5-hour flight, so I was pretty tired by the time I got home. When I got to the new house, I looked around for a little bit, called my dad. He told me which one was my room, and I came in and went to sleep. I woke up at like 3 a.m. with my door wide open and lights on all over the house that I hadn't turned on myself. I was pretty sure I had turned at least some of the lights off, so I was kind of anxious, but I also figured it could have just been my mind making it up since I was so tired. I got up, turned off the hallway light, closed the door, and turned off the light in my room. I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't want to go all around the house because I'm kind of a wuss. The next day, I had no problems. I bought a pizza and chilled out by the pool. I was loving living in this mini mansion by myself. A few more days went by, and one night, I was watching Moonlit in my living room when I fell asleep on the couch. I woke up naturally at about 2 a.m. on the recliner chair. The lights were off this time rather than on, and I knew I had left them on. I sat there for a moment and then realized there was something moving in the kitchen. I watched in terror as I saw a bald man walking across the kitchen. He had an abnormally large head, almost like a light bulb with his grinning smile. The room was illuminated only by the glass screen door to the right of the kitchen. He just started walking back and forth throughout my kitchen. My heart was pounding. My phone was dead because I fell asleep and I just stared, holding my breath, holding myself completely still, doing my best to hold back my shivers. He kept walking back and forth, opening drawers. He did this for about 10 minutes until he looked over at me and then walked out of the house. When he left, I sprinted upstairs and looked outside, only to see nothing. I figured it was a dream. I went downstairs and checked the door. Yep, the automatic lock is good. There is no way anyone could have gotten in or out. At midnight, my passcode lock refuses entry, and you have to have the physical key to get in. I chalked it up to a hallucination and went to bed. The next night, I played some video games online with a buddy of mine. We were having fun until I walked down at about 11 p.m. only to see the front door wide open. I had left earlier to go get some food, but I remembered clearly closing it when I came home. I was unnerved by this, but still thought not a lot of it. I went to sleep at about 11 p.m. that night. I was sleeping normally until I woke up at 3 a.m. again to see the lights on outside my room. I swore I had turned them off. I heard footsteps outside walking up and down the hallway. I sat in horror again, lying in my bed, trying not to make a noise. I had thought maybe someone had really gotten into the house when I had left the door open. However, the lights turned off and nobody left the house because I would have heard it out the window. So once again, I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me. This brings us to last night. Well, more like this morning. Last night, I went out to get food again. When I left my house, I remembered closing the door and turning the lock on. I heard the click and I left. I ended up going to Five Guys, which, by the way, it's way too expensive for not very good food. Anyways, when I got home, I was mortified to see the door wide open. This time, I was highly scared. It couldn't be a dream. I snuck into my house, closed the door, and locked it. I went into my kitchen and grabbed one of those steak carving forks as a weapon and went through my house. I checked each room, turned on all the lights, and made sure no one could get out. I called my dad. No good. He didn't pick up. He is in New York, so he was already asleep. I hung out and waited for a while and figured I was just crazy again. I went upstairs, and after an hour on my phone, I fell asleep. This morning, I woke up in a rush and saw the man standing in my doorway staring at me. The same man as before, only to sprint away when I got up to chase him. I got up and grabbed the steak fork again and ran after him down the hall for there to be nothing there. This is what prompted me to write this. I saw him in broad daylight and he responded to me following him and threatening him. I figure he is not real, something my mind is making up because I'm here alone. But has anyone had such vivid hallucinations like this? What do I do to stop having these? Also, I checked the carbon monoxide monitors and they seem fine. I replaced the batteries and everything is fine at the moment. From my understanding, it makes a beep noise when it detects a leak and it's not making anything. But I'm going to let it sit for a few hours as I leave the house. The more I think about it, the more I second guess my mental state because most of the stuff that happens when I leave or enter consciousness. However, the door stuff just freaks me out. I appreciate a lot of people's concerns. A lot of people tell me there may be something wrong with my head if I'm seeing such vivid hallucinations. You may be right, and this has been kind of eye-opening to look into my mentality. For the time being, if I'm going to buy cameras, I don't think I will. I believe what is causing this man to return to my dreams and hallucinations is me believing he is real, at least to some extent. Last night, I stayed up until about 4 a.m. Many people noted that whenever I see him, it's when I wake up. Last night, I didn't sleep, and he made no appearances. I checked the doors, and the only strange occurrence of the night was that my garage door was unlocked. But that one I'm more okay with pinning on myself than some mystery squatter. Everything stayed shut all night.
Case notes for creepy file number 42, the Lightbulb Intruder. I think there's a lot more to this than simply hallucinations or a glitched out mental state. You already checked the carbon monoxide detector, which should always be in operation, and I highly recommend that everyone get one. You never know, it's an insidious killer. I do think there's more going on here than simply being crazy. You'd have to be full-on schizophrenic to be hallucinating this often and in such extreme ways, and also shutting on and off lights, opening doors without even realizing you're doing it. That's Tyler Durden level crazy. I don't think that's you. I mean, nothing wrong with getting checked out, but I do assume here that it's probably an entity or maybe some human intruder. But what kind of human intruder has a light bulb shaped head? Now maybe you applied that hallucination towards it, but why would he keep coming back if it's just a human being? What's the goal on that? Good question to ask. Personally, I do think it's probably some sort of entity. Maybe a trickster just trying to torment you. Given how high-tech the home is, I can't imagine anything else. If it was just a human intruder, what could their motivation be? Just to play around with you? I haven't heard of that, especially over such a long period of time. I do highly recommend that you get cameras though. I don't know how long it'll be until your family comes to join you in the house. If it continues to happen when multiple people are there, and no one is mentioning anything about you walking around sleepwalking or acting differently, then I don't think it's you. I do think there's some sort of entity there. If lights start to flicker, if you feel odd in any way, then do pay attention. That said, I don't get the impression that you're in any danger, so at least there's that. Enjoy the high-tech home.
Bonus case file, written by Definitely Not OP. An extraordinary encounter of the third kind. This happened to me July this year, and I've been thinking about it constantly since. I'll try to sum up the experience as best as I can. I'm kind of a mentally damaged oddity. I have bipolar disorder and complex post-traumatic disorder. I'm a 24-year-old girl who lives alone in the city, just minding my own business. I have a few friends, but I'm not close with my family. It's not unusual for me to go a few weeks or months without really seeing anyone besides coworkers, especially during a globalized pandemic. So I've just been doing my own thing. This encounter happened during one of the few week stretches of isolation. I'm only giving this bit of exposition so people can understand my psych history as well as my mental state, etc. So at the start of July, I got this uncontrollable impulse to go camping and stargaze. I never go camping alone, haven't been in around 4 years, and had no camping crap whatsoever. But I wanted to go for some reason, so I researched some good dark sky spots in Utah, found a cute little campground about 4 hours into the desert, and reserved the last spot available for a week out from that day. I bought all my stuff the day before and just drove out. I'm kinda terrible at planning and time management, so by the time I arrived at the campground, the sun was already going down. I also had forgotten my charger and realized I had to make my 60% battery last until I could make it back to the city the next day. There was no service out there, so that seemed easy enough. My entire goal was to chill in my hammock chair all night and stargaze anyway, so all I needed was some music for that. I specifically chose the night of a new moon for this, so I knew I had to get my tent set up and situated ASAP before the sun went down. There are a lot of others here, but most are families with kids getting ready for bed. Could hear parents reading scripture to their kids before bed, and could see others reading on Kindles and stuff before sleeping. By the time everything is set up, it's about 10 p.m. Everyone almost at once turns their lights off and passes out. This really weirded me out at first because it was the perfect night for stargazing. I didn't see a single other person setting up a chair to stargaze, any telescopes, or even just someone outside of their tent looking up. Everyone was either already asleep or going to sleep. I gave it some more thought and figured they all probably just wanted to wake up before or with the sunrise because we're in the desert. Sleeping in wouldn't exactly be a pleasant experience when you're getting cooked alive, I imagine. I worked night shift, so staying up was not an issue in the slightest bit. So at this point, the only people I can see that are awake are myself, this family at the campground vaguely near me reading scripture, and a whole mess of people in the bathroom. My tent is located at the far side of the campground, so to my left is nothing but desert and cliff. In front of me is the bathroom, about 100 feet or so away, 2 other campgrounds, about 300 feet away, and more desert and sky. To my right and behind me is the rest of the campground. There's another bathroom on the far side of the campground behind me to my right, which is probably around 700 to 900 feet away. These 2 bathrooms are the only source of any light in the campground aside from a few people who are using their flashlights to come to and from the bathroom. Like I said earlier, I'm a weirdo. I won't deny that, which makes honestly telling the story to others kinda hard. So my goal out here was to grieve and to move on from a lot of loss I experienced a year ago. A lot of bad stuff happened in my life and I lost a lot of loved ones as a result. Sometimes a good trip will really help one find a lot of closure when it comes to grief. So that was my only goal during this camping expedition. I ate about 2 grams of the substance and it was coming up around 11 p.m. Now hear me out here. What kind of freaking close encounter story can be believed when the person telling it was under the influence of a psychedelic, you might be asking. That's a good freaking question, and I would say that being skeptical of a person's experience under the influence of such drugs is common sense. That being said, I want to say that I have a gross amount of experience with psychedelics, some trips in even weirder and more isolated places than this. Let's just say that mushrooms have been involved dozens of times in my life, and others hundreds of times. Not only that, but I keep journals of my experiences, have recordings from trips, etc. Never once has anything like this happened to me before or since. I have never seen things while tripping, have never interacted with entities, have never had thoughts or paranoia about something being there that's not. I have always had the same trips where some textures get wavy, my emotions become full and bright, and I feel at peace in my mind for those few hours finally. That's it. I'm convinced that what happened to me in the desert was not a product of the drugs, but merely happened to me while I was on them. It would have been the same had I not been on them, but that's just my opinion. I definitely do invite skepticism otherwise. It's understandable. So yeah, I'm coming up and I'm ready to gaze. I gotta pee though, and all these people hanging around the bathroom are making me nervous. No one else is awake that I can see now, no lights are on or tents open anywhere around me. The only people still awake are all over by the bathroom. I eventually cave and just head over there and do my thing. Luckily, no one bothered me or said anything to me. I start walking back over to my chair. So my spot is pretty close to the bathroom. I can walk from the front of it in a straight line in the dark, and I will without fail hit my tent after about 25 seconds of walking. Because it's this easy, I don't bother whipping my flashlight out to get there. Plus, saving my phone battery for the drive out is still my priority anyway. I'm walking through the dark when I see the outline of my hammock chair and a person standing right next to it staring at it. I freeze and stare at them too. I'm super confused as to why this person is in my camp spot, standing alone in the dark just staring at my chair. Maybe they are curious about it? I don't know. It's weird as hell. I wave at them, but they don't notice. So I move a little closer, and I guess the sound of my footsteps alerted them to my presence. They shot their heads up towards me, took around 3 steps in my direction, backed up about 6 steps, flashed a bluish flashlight in my eyes, and quickly walked away from me towards another person I hadn't noticed either, standing in the dark around 15 feet from us. They both stand next to each other, shining their blue flashlights at their feet, and they both move around me towards the bathroom and disappear into the girls' restroom. Freaking weird, right? I thought so, standing there all terrified like a dumb idiot. I rationalized that the first person must have been waiting for their friend to catch up or something. I sit down and finally put on some good music in my headphones and just melt into the beautiful show playing in the sky above. It's around 11:30 to midnight, and there's still people freaking around near the woman's restroom. It's actually really just distracting at this point and bugging me a lot because it's right in my line of sight. They just kept waving their flashlights around and coming in and out, but they never seem to go anywhere. They will walk out of the restroom, turn their lights off, and just walk in the dark without their lights to guide them. They usually will either walk behind the bathroom where I can't see them, or off to the left side into the dark where there are no camp spots. I notice someone is standing next to me now. I tear my headphones out and shoot my head to my right. There is a silhouette of a person standing about 7 feet from my chair. I am frozen and spooked pretty bad. They take around 2 to 3 steps towards me, then back up again around 6, then walk around me and always to the dark with no flashlight away from me and the bathroom. Now that's it, I'm freaking spooked beyond words. I don't think it's anything supernatural at this point, but I definitely think it's some people up to no good. The nearest city is hundreds of miles away, and we are far from any civilization out here. If these were people trying to hurt me, they could do it rather easily. I stay in the chair for now, but I keep my headphones off so I can hear the environment around me. My head is now on a swivel, but I'm still trying my best to enjoy the night. Now it's midnight and no one else is awake. No flashlights anywhere, no voices, nothing. All the bathroom people finally vanished and it was just me awake, as far as I could tell. With my headphones off, I started to notice sounds now. The sound of a jet somewhere nearby would come and go, flying around wherever in the desert. I kept looking for its aircraft lights, but could never find them. This deep, almost physics-defying boom would occasionally shake the desert, but in a weird way. When I heard and felt it, I would feel my body tense and shake with it, and the air too, but never the ground. It's weird because it sounded as if it was coming from the ground itself, not the air. I would hear what also sounded like laughter coming from the desert to my left, the portion of desert with no camp spots or people. I'm still at this point just chilling. I'm obviously starting to suspect some weird crap, but for the most part I'm chilling and enjoying the night. Then, orbs in the sky. I practically crapped myself when I saw this. Above one of the cliffs far out in the horizon, this little swarm of glowing orbs had appeared and they were almost dancing around one another. I remember this moment very clearly. I remember seeing them, thinking, I can't explain that. What the hell is that? There's nothing I could imagine that can move like that, not even drones. I won't record this, I promise. It would ruin it and I want to see it through. I remember thinking that last part very clearly out of nowhere and thought it was weird how specific it was in my mind. I hadn't even thought to record it in the first place, at least consciously, as I had just noticed it was there. But here I was making a promise to myself that I wouldn't even try no matter what would happen. Another cluster of orbs appears in the sky to my right, and almost simultaneously, the orbs to my left instantly shoot across the sky to join the other orbs. I start smiling like a freaking idiot. This is it. the thing I stopped believing in for decades because I never saw it. I had let the world convince me that it was just as boring as it appeared and never once allowed myself to think it could actually be more than that. And the proof of that was finally freaking staring me in the face. I had to keep checking in with myself like, this isn't the mushrooms, right? No, it's definitely not. I see that and no, I'm not hallucinating. Probably went through that little personal questioning process close to a dozen times over the course of the next few minutes. The jet sound comes back, and it's much louder now. I can actually see the aircraft lights now flying directly overhead, but they aren't blinking like usual. They fly into this dark cloud in the sky I hadn't noticed before, and vanish along with the jet sound. The orbs continue playing around each other until they vanish too. All in all, I'd say this lasted for like an hour. It's now around 1 a.m. and I really gotta freaking pee. I obviously hold it as long as I can because I'm witnessing the single most special thing I'll ever get to see right in front of my eyes, but eventually I break and just want to get it over with. So I'm a trans woman. I wouldn't even bring that up if it didn't have some sort of relevancy to the story, by the way. I look and sound exactly like a girl. It's pretty much impossible for people to tell that I'm not cis and haven't been clocked in a long time, but I still have all the male genitalia. I'm out here in the freaking desert on shrooms witnessing some high strangeness, but I still gotta be careful of what bathroom I use. Normally I would just use the girls, but those people I encountered earlier were still making me paranoid, so I figured if worse comes to worse, I'd rather be caught in the men's in case there are some weirdos out here. I head in there and I'm doing my thing at the urinal as fast as possible. I zip down and start going. The freaking goddamn moment I start, the door to the restroom shoots the frick open and some guy with short brown hair around 5'6", with a sunken droopy face, runs in eyes glued to the ground and barges into the stall next to me, shutting the door and doing his business. The only word I could use to describe him was that he looked sick. This obviously scares the hell out of me. It's like 1 a.m. and I haven't seen another human being in a few hours, and I just saw the light show in the sky. And here I am peeing, freaking standing up at a urinal, and I'm alone with this dude. He pees for no joke 3 seconds. That's it. All that rush, all that urgency for 3 seconds of tinkle time? Who does that? He spent the rest of his time there slowly pulling out toilet paper from the roller for some reason. I'm a dumb bitch and just held my bladder for way too long. So I'm trying my freaking best to just get it all out so I can leave, but it's taking forever. I finally finish and for some reason go to wash my hands. I don't know why. It just felt like the right thing to do in the moment. The guy shoots out of the stall again way too hard and fast, comes right next to me at the sink, washes his hand for a total of 2 seconds, and leaves the bathroom as fast as he entered. I'm just kinda there, shaken. But again, I'm trying to rationalize this. I just think he's probably tripping too, and the sight of some girl peeing at the urinal at 1 a.m. probably made him think I was an alien too. So I head out and back to my chair. The moment I sat down, the lights in the bathroom I was just in shut off all at once. The lights in the girls' bathroom and the boys'. No one enters or leaves either, and now just a single tiny yellow bulb can be seen glowing above a park ranger's bulletin board on the other side of the building. I sit down and almost kind of invite more weird crap to happen around me. The jets are back now, and louder than before. There are orbs, now huge rings around the campground, pulsating and growing, and then dimming, slowly drifting around. I am terrified, but I also can't move. That's really the whole reason I didn't hide in my tent. Who the hell in their right mind would listen to their instinct to run when you could see how far it could go? I hear weird sounds coming from the desert, what sounds like shouting and a baby crying far away. The orbs reappear in the sky, and behind the trees next to my tent, it looks like the moon is shining through, but it's a new moon. It's now 2 a.m. The bathroom lights come back on, but only the lights in the men's restroom. The women remain off, and I see no one come or go. At the point, the only thing that can be heard coming from my mouth the past little bit is, "I'm a dumb bitch. Why am I doing this? This is terrifying and I'm dumb for just letting it happen." I'm very aware of my desire to run and give in to the fear, but that is highly outweighed by my curiosity. At least it was. A person who comes from seemingly nowhere with no flashlight on and no clear intention of direction walks in front of the bathroom, and it's terrifying. Normally that ain't freaking scary, it's just some person. But like, this person was easily 10 to 13 feet tall. The bathroom itself was around 13 feet tall, and this person walking in front was at mid-level with the top ventilation window. The crown of their head was taller than the building itself. They walked in front of the restroom and into the dark, and I shot out of my chair. The only thing I said was, "Nope, nope, 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 frickin' nope. Go to hell, screw you, that's terrifying. Nope, fricking nope." Or something like that. As fast as I could, I ran into my tent and quickly zipped it up. This wasn't even running at this point. My sympathetic nervous system just oiled over and was very adamant that I needed to freaking hide. It's hard to describe what I felt, but it was the most primal fear I've ever felt in my life. I have bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, so I'm used to feeling a staggering amount of terror in my mind on a daily basis when my symptoms show up. But this was on a whole other level. It was like some deep animal part of me understood the moment I saw them, or whatever it was, that I was no longer at the top of the food chain. Another ultra-predator, much, much smarter than me, had just made itself known, and my body was tending up like a wild animal at the sight of it. I felt truly humbled and small in that moment, and I knew I was outmatched. They were now outside of my tent, and were scurrying non-circles around it. The sound of their footsteps gave way to the feeling of their voice playing side by side with my own inner voice. This is where it gets hard to explain. We talked, but talking is not the right word for it. They communicate in pure concept and feeling, and it's so subtle and instantaneous it's hard to describe how obvious it is, while at the same time being so subtle as to almost be indistinguishable from your own thoughts and feelings. The things we talked about were rather personal, so I won't go into too much detail. I asked them about the jets, whether that was us and if we're trying to find them. They said yes. I thought we weren't smart enough to find you guys. They said no, you are smart. You just aren't creative. They said they are scared of us too, but are much more aware of us than them. They want to know us more, but it's hard. Too much complication. It cited me running and hiding as proof. I said that's natural. For us. I'm still an animal with a nervous system hardwired towards survival. Something new and unknown is going to do that to people no matter how rational they try to stay. They said they liked me because I was honest about the fear. They were scared too. They just want freedom, and they want that for us too, but they aren't quite sure what to do, or at least they wouldn't tell me. Whenever I would ask their name or why they were here, they would deliberately ignore me. They also seemed to get a kick out of messing with me, also citing that as a reason for this. They did one thing that I really liked, and it was to show me that they have always cared and always will. It really is hard to describe the feeling they gave me, but the best way to describe it was unconditional love. They called me family and kept expressing their love for me and told me that I chose this. I didn't get that part all too well. When they said that to me, all these memories flooded in from my childhood, but I'm still struggling to draw any connections. After a while, I of course had to pee again. I did, and nothing happened. I went back into my tent to eat some trail mix and to record an audio recording of what we just talked about, so I could remember as much as possible. I noticed the time on my phone said something like 11 a.m. My phone has never messed up like that before, changing the time on me. It was a little validating to see it, to be honest. It was very clearly the middle of the night, not 11 a.m. I left the tent and they messed with me just a little bit more. More orbs in the trees, lights going off in the bathroom, etc. Eventually, 5 a.m. hit and they were gone. The sun came up and I headed home. There's a lot of details I skipped over because this story is already way too long, but there you have it. Like I said, I don't expect anyone to believe me. I really do invite skepticism, honestly, as I was under the influence of a psychedelic substance. I do have to say, out of the hundreds of trips I've had, I've never experienced something like this before or since, nothing even close. I truly believe that these events happened, and that the drugs were not responsible for their inception whatsoever. What to take away from it? I don't know, to be honest. It was amazing and I want to meet them again. I am extremely humbled now. I believe in other beings again and have this sense of family and home in myself I've never quite had before. Has anyone out there met them too? I'd love to hear your story if so, and to let you know you aren't alone in your experience. They are out there, and they do exist.
Case notes for the bonus case file: an extraordinary close encounter of the third kind. So the first thing I'll just say is that, yeah, obviously this is harder to swallow for some people due to psychedelics being involved. Mind-altering substances can have effects and even cause hallucinations depending on the type. That's only as far as I know from other people, however. I myself have never consumed any sort of drug like that. In fact, the only drug I routinely consume is caffeine. I don't even do alcohol, I don't smoke, I don't really experiment with any other substances. I like my mind how it is. Nothing needs to change. Nothing against people who do take drugs, it's not for me. Now, from what I know, no drug would create a fluid hallucination to this extent. I could be wrong, and maybe it is just a hallucination based on the drug. Maybe part of it is, maybe the orbs in the sky and the jets were real, and it really was just the military pursuing unknown flying objects. Orbs flying in the sky are a often reported UFO sighting. So I think that's real. Now, the entity, maybe that's a hallucination? Maybe it's something your mind needed to hear to reinvigorate the spark in your life. Or maybe it's not a hallucination at all. I definitely like the idea of the ability to communicate telepathically. Because, there's a quote, I think it's from a TV show called Dexter, all about a serial killer getting away with murder, but he only kills, or tries to only kill, guilty people who've committed murder, from his father's Harry's code. Anyways, not to go on a tangent, there's a quote from his father telling him, no matter how close two people are, there's an infinite distance that separates them. As sad as that quote is, I think there's a lot of truth to it. We can't truly know someone else. We can't go into their mind and know what they're thinking, how they're feeling. So if that is possible, if there are aliens out there that can communicate telepathically with us, then presumably we could do it too at some point, maybe with other humans. And maybe just in that essence, we can connect together in a way that we never thought possible. There's a lot of beauty, a lot of hope, and a lot of danger in that possibility. We'll see what happens.
Case file number 726, written by Mokwa. The moon teleported. I've been struggling to find the words to describe what exactly happened on July 2nd, 2022. At around 10 p.m. that night, the moon moved. Me and my mom were driving down a completely straight road on our way to the theaters. She had noticed the moon maybe 5 minutes before the incident, and we both looked in awe at a red light. It was a beautiful night and it was still light outside. I'm located in Alberta, Canada. Mere minutes later, I noticed the moon had moved pretty significantly in the sky. I drew a rough sketch of what it sort of looked like here. I immediately told my mom, "Hey, is it just me or did the moon move?" And she looked a little scared because she had just noticed it as well. We never left that road. We didn't turn a different lane or anything. If that would even result in any major difference in the moon's location, it literally just moved in the sky, and it gets worse. We arrived in the parking lot at the theaters and the moon was still in its secondary position. Something deep inside told me not to pay it any attention and to just look away. I'm not like this at all. I'm very deer in headlights when it comes to something that's scaring me. I always stop, wait, and stare at the unexplained until I can find an answer. And I'm mad I wasn't looking because as soon as I felt it was okay to look up, the moon had returned to its original location. At this point, me and my mom were completely freaked out. We were parked in an unmoving vehicle and the moon had moved across the sky in a matter of seconds. We still have no idea how to rationalize what we witnessed. Later that night, I looked up the phrase, moon moved, on Twitter to possibly see if anyone had posted about it, and they did. Just one other person somewhere in America tweeted around the same time, "The moon just freaking moved?" If anyone has any similar experiences, please let me know, especially if it happened on July 2nd too.
Case notes for file 726. The moon teleported. Anyone else get Truman Show vibes from this? I did.
Although, certainly not from the same perspective as the person on the show, because 2 people saw it, and they're able to verbalize it to other people as well. So they're not the ones in the show, the whole planet is the show. So maybe aliens are involved here? Or maybe some government conspiracy? It's curious, because there's many stories about the moon itself being some sort of hologram. It's not made of cheese, it just might not be made at all. Of course, if I'm being honest, I do believe the moon is real. I think we probably did go there. You can bounce a laser off the mirror they placed on the moon and have it return. So it seems like at least we sent something there, and it does actually physically exist. Should just be some giant solid piece of rock that broke off from Earth from a giant impact billions of years ago, and then it formed into a solid sphere. But if that is the case, what the hell is going on with all these holographic issues? I mean, the moon teleporting in different locations as in this story, or another story where there was just a ripple line like a hologram from top to bottom, fading through it, like it was just a projection in the sky, like the bat signal or something. How does that happen? And I fully believe this one since it's 2 people that saw it happen, and even questioning their own sanity so they didn't want to say it to each other. You can't quite fake that. Plus someone else mentioned they saw it too. But then why only 3 people? Obviously something happened, but if it's a holographic projection, more than 3 people would have seen it, presumably. Maybe just no one wants to say it for fear of being labeled insane. I think that fear does come into play more than we might expect. But to confirm it all, I suppose I'll just have to book a space flight with a pit stop on the moon from Elon Musk's. He wants to go to Mars. As long as I can come back, I would love to do that.
Creepy File number 43. Written by Drama Affectionate 381. Parental Discombobulation. Hello. I, 27 female, am married to my husband, 31 male, and we have 2 children, fake names. Isaac, 8 male, from my first marriage, and Tiana with my now husband, 5 female. I am very distraught right now because I have been seeing this woman almost everywhere I go, and I have no idea if this is happening by coincidence, and I'm trying to be calm as I write this. This whole situation started somewhere around May 2022, where me and Isaac were at the local park, just doing our own thing. My son was playing with some other child at the monkey bars when I saw this woman approach me. She had red hair, pretty sure it was natural, and her face seemed tear-stained. I became concerned as I thought she was crying. I proceeded to ask her what was wrong, if she was alright, but she kept staring at my son. The more she looked at him, the more she sobbed. Then, all of a sudden, she sprints to him, running, screaming, "Michael!" She kept calling him that and it freaked me out. I mean, she was running to my kid and calling him a different name. My son and the other child got scared and I approached them before she did, as I was faster than her. I then screamed at her to get lost, but she just stood there as I held my son and she seemed pretty enraged. She then muttered some things, but I could not hear her as she stomped away. The other child's father and I talked for a bit, and he seemed alarmed by what happened. He predicted that she was probably a grieving mother and that my son looked like the child she lost. I was still disturbed and took my son home. Since then, I have been afraid to take any of my children into public areas despite my husband's reassurance. Skip to June 2nd, 2022. I get a call from my school stating that a woman, who was a new volunteer for lunch duty, kept mentioning that my son was her Mikey Bear, and that she'd been looking for him for years. They told me that another volunteer who had been working with her reported this. I was scared as hell, and I acted immediately by signing my kids out for the day. When I called the school the next day, I was informed she was no longer there, so I became pretty freaked out again. Skip to last week, July 13th, 2022. It was Tiana's 5th birthday, and we decided to host it at a park in my in-laws' hometown. Everything went well, although I was paranoid. It was then somewhere around 9 p.m. when we began tidying up, and as I looked at the many oak trees behind, I could have sworn I saw her. I screamed at the top of my lungs and started chasing after her, but she somehow got away. Ever since then, I have not seen her, but I feel like this is not the end of it. I am seriously considering homeschooling my children because of what has happened. The police were on their way. The police were somewhat helpful. They were here from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
We told them about the incident with the woman, and thankfully they were able to get a hold of her information from the school. The information she handed in about herself may possibly be fake. That is still not confirmed yet. The cops did say that they were going to interview the woman who was volunteering alongside her, as well as the children and teacher in my son's classroom. A police report has been filed though. Some of you guys mentioned that she could be associated with my deceased ex, and I just realized my son does look awfully like his dad, so I'm scared as hell right now. She could be a crazy ex or family member, but I have only known her through this situation. That's it. I don't freaking know. Bonus file. Written by Throwaway Target. Sucks Pins. The Steel-Toed Spirit. My friend lost their father. At the time, I wasn't close enough with them and their friends and family to attend the funeral they were holding for him, at least not comfortably, but I stayed at their house to wait for them to get back. That way, we could hang out and I could be there to support them. Friend leaves their house at around 6 p.m. with their other 2 family members, leaving me at their home completely alone. Fast forward and it's getting late, around 10 p.m., so I'm basically expecting my friend to be back at any second. My friend's dad was a construction worker and always wore steel-toed boots that were loud as they walked around the 1-story house with wood floors. But my friend also wears steel-toed boots as they have a profession that requires them to as well. Important fact, their dad's room was directly across the hall from theirs, meaning you always heard their parents walking down the hall and going in and out of the room. 10:15 rolls around. I hear work boots walking down the hall. I got excited because I was extremely bored waiting for my friend and knew they were finally home. But then the sound of the boots entered the parents' room across the hall and I heard the door shut, loud and clear. I waited in confusion, thinking maybe my friend was just doing something personal. 10 minutes go by and they still haven't come out of the parents' room. I then decided to walk out of the friend's room to find that the entire house, including the parents' room, is dark. No sign of anyone being home. Complete darkness and silence. At this point, I'm even more confused. Now, I decided to text my friend and ask, "What's taking so long for you to come back to your room? Is everything okay?" Thinking maybe they didn't turn the light on for some reason in their parents' room. They respond that the funeral just ended and they're finishing up cleaning up to leave where it was being held shortly. Nobody was even home yet. I'll never forget this moment for probably the rest of my life. Case notes for the bonus file. The Steel-Toed Spirit. There's a certain comfort in this. It almost feels like astral projection, but from a spirit that already passed away. And I think it is the same thing. When we're astral projecting, we're effectively decoupling the spirit from the body, even though we're still alive, and then it can come back. But I think that's sort of what echoes are. So if we die and quantum immortality is true, the majority of our spirit or essence or soul is transposed to another universe. But some of it still remains behind, a tiny fragment or echo, as I like to say. And they behave sort of as we do. But they're just copies. They're not entirely us. They're not animated in the same way. So they may have certain emotions that linger, and that's why they're tethered to a certain spot, because they don't have any other choice. They don't know anything else. But it is beautiful in a way, and I read the comment that you left in the thread where your friend felt a cathartic response to hearing this story. As in, yeah, your dad is still there, in many different ways. I think he's okay. To give relief from such a grave tragedy is just incredible. Perhaps you should tell him about quantum immortality. Maybe he would find even more solace and emotional support from knowing that his dad is probably still around in a different universe. He doesn't even know anything happened. Case file number 727. Written by Cyanix. I witnessed my daughter's soul enter her body. My beautiful daughter is now nearly 9 years old. I was pregnant with her when I was 18, and she was born when I was 19. I remember when I was around 18 weeks pregnant, I was finally over morning sickness and the heartburn was yet to kick in. I basically had about 3 weeks between them where I felt okay. I was sitting in my partner's attic bedroom in his parents' house. It was always a creepy place, being a big old building and had several paranormal encounters there, but this one was different. We were talking about labor plans, where I was going to live after she came. Not relevant, but I moved back to my mama's house when she was expected. This pure white orb, absolutely tiny, but with the most calming presence, appeared and was floating around in front of my face. We both saw it. It was playful and sweet, just as my DD always has been. The next thing I know, it darted into the top of my teensy tiny second trimester bump, and that was the first time I felt her movements. I've always had somewhat of an affinity with ghostly presences, starting with a not-so-imaginary friend who I stopped seeing when we moved houses when I was around 4. I know it sounds mental, but I've always believed it was her spirit joining with her body. The way I felt in the presence of that orb is exactly how I feel in the presence of my wonderful girl. Thanks for listening. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I really do feel as if it was the first time I ever met my baby.
Case notes for file 727. I witnessed my daughter's soul enter her body. I just want to say that this is a beautiful story. And the whole concept of the orbs that people report seeing throughout life, that they're just souls that are fragment or energized, full, not just echoes, fragments of souls, but fully realized souls that are trying to find their way back to their body or just to a new body. Like in your case here, your baby wasn't fully animated yet, and then it was. Makes sense. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be some visual thing that we could see with our own eyes, but it does make sense that there would be some sort of visual cue, because I imagine souls have a lot of energy. It's almost like connecting a controller wirelessly to a computer. There's a signal, a real physical connection that happens there, or a real energetic connection, so to say. And you know, something interesting just crossed my mind. I remember my mom telling me something similar to this. I don't know if there was an orb involved, but I remember she said something happened to her while she was pregnant with me, and it made her believe in more than the mundane, let's say. I don't know if it was an orb, but I know she said something entered her body while she was pregnant, and she thinks it affected me. A very interesting thought.
Creepy file number 44, written by Anonymous. Pure primal fear. My boyfriend, 23 male, and I, 23 female, recently decided that we wanted to take the new tent we bought on its first trip. The tent was one that hooks up to your car to provide more storage space, and we were excited to try it out. We had planned a kayaking trip the next day at a kayak rental shop. It was supposed to be a nice, inexpensive, outdoorsy weekend getaway. We tend to book things last minute, so all the state parks and professional campgrounds were full. This led us to a website that is essentially an Airbnb for camping. The place we chose was a 100-acre property just 20 minutes south of the kayak shop. Of all the sites in the area, it was described as having working bathrooms, showers, it allowed for campfires, and all the sites were car accessible, important for a car-dependent tent. This site was also the most reviewed in the area, with 3 5 out of 5 star reviews. The area was very rural, so we did not think much about the low number of reviews for any of the campsites. The renter was Mary, who only ever texted us updates, but seemed sweet. We started our 2-hour drive a bit later than anticipated, which put us behind the 11 a.m. time we had originally informed the host we would arrive at, but we tried to keep her updated with the new schedule. She just told us to let her know when we arrive at the address she sent us. We arrive at the address and are greeted with the barn from the pictures. It had string lights lit up all over it, seemed fairly new, and just gave off a nice feel to it. We sat in the car for a minute and struggled with cell service to text the host to let her know we had arrived. 10 minutes after our text sends, a sweaty man who appears to be in his late 60s pulls up in an ATV. He lets us know he is the father-in-law to Mary, and she is busy taking care of the seasonal harvest and sends him instead. He lets us know we can take the car anywhere on the property and offers to show us around on the ATV. My boyfriend, visibly uncomfortable, declines the offer and asks a few more questions about the woods and how far into them we are allowed to take the car. Anywhere. We can go anywhere, and the ATV man even offers to help pull my car out if it gets stuck. We ask one final question about cell service, and he jokes that if we are from around here, we will understand that reception works better on one side of the barn than the other. I am from around here and thought it was funny. But once he said that, I realized he didn't have any ounce of an accent for here like he should. Eventually, he leaves and we begin exploring the property on foot. The barn has all the lights on in the middle of the day and it looks nice and maintained. It is insulated and has a working kitchen. The only warning we got was not to drink the water. It seemed like a place that would host a small 50-guest wedding. We walked past the shed out behind the barn to get to the trails that ran through the woods. After going through a hike that my car would have never survived, we decided it might be best to just camp by a small creek, and we chose a spot on the side opposite the barn. We were still within walking distance, but we used my car as a buffer to feel a bit more isolated. We chose our spot and then go into the main town to eat and walk around. We message Mary about the fire policy and she tells us that they will deliver a fire ring to the barn for us to take to the camp. We arrived back at the barn about an hour and a half away from nighttime. We drove by the barn and the lights had been turned off. We assumed it was on a timer so as to not waste energy or money. We also noticed the fire ring had not yet been delivered. We start the grueling 30-minute setup in the sticky heat and reward ourselves with a sit in the air-conditioned car after. We notice it looks like it's about to rain, so my boyfriend and I pull out a card game and wait for it to pass in the car. It only lasted about 10 minutes, but it is starting to sunset. The tent held up nicely, so we felt okay leaving it for a second. Needing to use the bathroom, we started walking to the barn. As we crossed the creek, we hear what sounds to be like someone in the shed behind the barn. They sound like they're moving things around. A bit unsettling, but I tell my boyfriend that maybe they used equipment today and it's just sitting in there making the cracking cool-off noise that equipment sometimes does. We get to the barn and the lights are still off, but the fire ring is there. We go in and check to make sure the power is off, and it is not just the lights outside. None of the light switches will work, so we assume the power is cut. Again, maybe it's just on a timer, no worries. We step out of the barn and get 10 feet away and we hear a hum in the distance to the opposite side of the shed. The power to the barn is restored. Maybe it's the weather. We change direction to use the bathroom. As soon as we step inside, the power cuts again and the hum stops. I start to get a weird feeling, and I can tell he has it too. I look at my boyfriend and say, maybe they're watching us. I immediately followed up with, no, that's a lot worse. We walk back outside and the lights turn on. My boyfriend says that we need to leave, and I have the same gut-wrenching primal fear. We put the ring back by the barn since we had moved it 10 feet, and the barn lights start flickering. We briskly walk back to the car. The 30-minute setup was torn down in 5 minutes, and we jumped in the car and locked it. I managed to get my car going, thanking God that the rain did not get my car stuck. We started towards the driveway, and just as we made it to the road, my boyfriend looked back and saw a man standing by the shed watching us. As soon as my car pulls off onto the road, we get a text from Mary letting us know that the fire ring is out by the barn. She also informs us that we are welcome to stay in the barn if the rain has messed up our camping experience. We arrive at a nice hotel, willing to splurge for safety. At this point, it's 10 p.m. at the earliest. A sweet older lady checks us in. Desperate for validation and just comfort from anyone, we tell her what had just happened to us at the campsite. She looks shocked. She asks if we had seen the news lately, to which we both respond that we had not. The lady tells us that couples in the state have been going missing. All of them had gone camping. 3 couples were truly missing, and one was recently found on the side of the freeway, slashed to near death. They are, to the time of posting, still recovering in the hospital. We couldn't find many articles about where in the state, but the look on the lady's face suggested it was near us. We get to our room and text Mary back to tell her we are not staying anymore. Thank you for staying with us. We lock the door to our hotel room and I break down into tears. I will not forget that feeling I got at the barn. The primal fight or flight feeling and the feeling of being watched. I feel it in my throat just writing this. I never want to experience that again.
Case notes for creepy file number 44.
pure primal fear. I think trusting your gut is always the correct answer. Who knows what that old man was up to? I mean, who knows if Mary even existed? Maybe it was just part of some ploy to get people to go there. It is peculiar that there were 3 other 5-star reviews, so it may be that Mary is real and she doesn't even know this is going on. Maybe this old guy is just creeping the place and waiting for people to park in sometimes and then try to ambush them when they're vulnerable. Or yeah, Mary doesn't exist and this is all some scam to kill people or just terrorize them. But he doesn't do it all the time, otherwise, well, wouldn't really work out. Negative reviews, yeah, there's some creepy guy trying to kill us. Don't go there. That's one thing I do like about Airbnb, is that they have pretty stringent background checks and verification processes for the hosts, so it's unlikely you're gonna rent a place from some serial killer. Never impossible, I suppose, but yeah. Always be careful. And I would definitely inform the police if you haven't already. Give them a heads up, and if enough people do inform them of the same property, they may be able to investigate.
Case file number 728, written by Salty Sweet 420, The Chobani Mystery. I keep a close track of everything I eat, counting calories and trying to limit myself so I don't binge. I keep a list on my calendar app of everything I eat every day of the week, listing times, calories if I know them, serving sizes, and so on. Today, at around 1:30 p.m., I decided to eat my first food of the day. I had only woken up a few hours ago and didn't feel that hungry, but I knew it was best to eat something so I could at least function. I decided to eat a Chobani flip. I checked the fridge. The only one we had left was a key lime pie flavored one. It was on top of a container of beef stew and next to what I think was a container of fruit and some energy drink. I don't remember exactly. It was set diagonally. I know for a fact it was the last one because I checked behind it for others and there were none. I went to the living room so I could eat while watching TV. I eat slowly as it makes me feel less hungry. I remember every bite I took vividly. I also remember writing it down in the notes for today in my calendar. I remember eating the whole thing, toppings and all. I even chewed on the plastic cover for a bit before getting up and throwing it away in the trash in the kitchen. I sat on my phone for a few minutes, scrolling through Twitter or something. At around 1:46, I thought, I should drink some water so I'm not hungry later. So I went to the fridge to get a water bottle. Then, I noticed the yogurt I had just eaten was in the same spot it had been before. At first I thought I had zoned out and instead of throwing it away, I put it back in the fridge. But it was completely full, unopened. It didn't even have bite marks on the packaging. And it was so cold that it's not like someone put it in there and I just didn't notice. The only other person home is my mom, and she's been upstairs on the phone or something for about half an hour. I don't know. I can just hear her talking from downstairs because she never closes her door. She couldn't have come down. I would have known because the stairs that go upstairs and downstairs are in the living room where I was eating. For a while I just sat there and thought, did I imagine eating it? Was there another that I just didn't notice? Did my mom somehow teleport downstairs and put another one in the fridge? Did someone else come in, replace it, and leave? Why would anyone do that? There's no point. I then thought to check my calendar app to see if I ever even ate it, or at least logged it down. I looked and the log wasn't there. I checked the other dates to see if it was there and I just put it on the wrong date. Nothing. I'm so confused. What happened? Did I imagine eating it, really? I didn't fall asleep. My dreams are very strange and I can often tell when I'm dreaming because it looks faded and I don't have any actual features, just a vague silhouette of a body. But I remember seeing how I grabbed the spoon and thinking it was funny. I never learned how to hold pencils and cutlery, so I just hold them however is most comfortable at the moment. Seeing myself and the yogurt in the mirror across the couch, seeing myself and the yogurt in a reflection of the TV before I turned it on. So what's going on? If there's a logical explanation, please tell me. Is this just déjà vu or fake memory or something? I added as much detail as possible because I really want an explanation for this. It sounds silly, but it's really stressing me out. I'm scared that I went to a different dimension where I didn't need it or something. Case file number 729, written by Sin Samila. He foretold his own demise.
Roughly 10 years ago, I was a restless 15-year-old developing a range of mental issues that led to a heavy substance addiction a few years later, all caused by an emerging borderline personality disorder. I'm almost 4 years clean now, I think. I found a sort of balance, so I'm happy for myself. I'm saying all this to paint the picture of those difficult years and the impact this event had on me. At the time, I met a person in school, LL, notorious for being the edgy emo that sings in a metal band, and me being the wannabe edgy emo girlfriend of a metal band kid. I was super invested. He was particularly weird, not in tune with this world. He lived in his own reality, and having to survive in this world was hard. Like he had difficulty understanding the basic rules of this society, and I related so much with that. Once, he fought with his parents and walked 20 kilometers in the middle of the night and walked through the woods just to come to my garden, left a heartfelt page letter on my patio, and spent the night walking through the countryside near my village. I still have that letter. On the other hand, I had a hard time believing what he was saying to me. His stories were a little too good. He always found himself in shenanigans or adventures, and I took these as stories, nothing more. We still enjoyed each other's company as a weird, infamous smoking emo couple. But there was a story he told in secrecy with such heartfelt emotions that it struck me, and I vividly remember that day. He confessed to me that he believed that he was an indigo child, and he knew when he would die. I was perplexed but intrigued, and asked for more information. Throughout his life, he always had this realization or intrusive thought that accompanied him, and he came to accept this fate. LL would die at 19 in a lot of pain. He saw besides himself blood and syringes, and no drugs involved, only a cut. We severed contact sometime after, when my substance addiction inevitably drove me away from all my previous close friends. Years later, I was 17 and still in high school. I remember that particular moment so clearly in my mind, like this happened yesterday. We were preparing to leave for the day at 1 p.m., and in the halls a large number of people were in clear shock. I asked one of my friends what all the fuss was about, and she told me that LL was killed. My first reaction? I laughed. For a second in my delusional mind, I thought that he was trolling everyone or trying to joke, leveraging on the fact that he always exaggerated stories about himself. For 15 minutes, I was blissfully delusional until someone else had more details. He was riding his bike with his bandmates to practice. When crossing the street, a driver on a big truck transporting gravel didn't see him and crushed him under the wheels of the vehicle. But at the time, LL wasn't dead. He was immediately transferred to an ambulance where he died, surrounded by pools of his own blood and paramedics trying to deal with multiple organ damage and internal bleeding. In that precise moment, what he said to me years prior resurfaced in my memory, and I literally froze. I could see myself in a third-person perspective. There was my life before, and then there was my life after that event. I really don't know how LL predicted his death, knowing so much that he described the exact moment to me, down to the circumstances and his precise age. After this, I really don't know what to think. I don't have any conclusions. I'm just afraid. I'm still baffled to this day. If you have similar stories, please share. I really need to try to understand what's happening here. How is this possible in a world where the future isn't already written?
Case notes for file 729. He foretold of his own demise. I'm truly sorry for your bewildering loss. I wonder how he felt, fully believing that he was going to die and he was predicting his own death years before. To believe you're going to die, I suppose that explains a lot of his actions. He just didn't care because he didn't think he'd be around for very long. I really hope he was able to cherish every moment. I also hope that he's still rocking around in some alternate universe. If quantum immortality is true, which I really do believe, then he probably is. Now, also related to free will and how this story can be true while free will is still true as well and valid. Okay, so how do I explain this? Think of life as a long road, only there are branching paths everywhere. Every choice we can make is a different path, and we have to walk it. We have to actively choose which path we go down. Of course, we don't know where the path is going to end,
and every single potential choice is another branching path in this long road of life. Now, your friend may have been able to predict the path that he was going to take, but he still had to choose to take it. And it was only one possible path of almost infinite, gazillions, googleplexes of possible variations and choices we can make. That's why there are so many alternate universes. Every potential branching path is a new universe spawned, where in that universe you took that path. Now, to actually know which path they're going to take is impossible. But if you had enough computational power, like a Matryoshka brain, which is like an entire solar system, or is it a galaxy of just pure computing power, then maybe you could predict where the path would go, but only one singular path. It's like someone foretold the future and then transmitted that information into his mind, and then he just went with it. The future that he would take after seeing the future. That's quite a play. In the end, though, we can't know every single path. In fact, we can't really know even 2 branches ahead. We just have to be very mindful of the choices we make, because they're so unknown.
Case file number 730, written by Baker Noon, 6764, Melrose Place, in the future. So this happened in the 90s. I had thought that I saw an episode of the TV show Melrose Place, and everyone in my family and extended family was enthralled by it. So one night, as a teenager, I was watching late night TV. I remember that I clearly saw one of the characters that was killed off on the show, accident, head trauma, I can't remember exactly what, came back to life. That she had a scar across her head and a wig that had covered it up pretty good. So we are all sitting around the living room watching the next installment of Melrose Place, and I stated out loud that I'd seen the episode before, and Kimberly comes back from the dead and has a massive scar under that wig. Everyone immediately started berating me and making fun of me. "That's one hell of a wig," I replied. "I swear that's what's gonna happen." More insults and laughter ensue. Fine, you'll all see. The TV show hadn't shown that episode yet, but I'd watched it somehow. A few weeks later, we are all doing the same thing, watching the new episode, and sure enough, Kimberly had come back from the dead and had a huge scar under a wig. They all looked at me strangely after that.
Case notes for file 730, Melrose Place, in the future. So first, I do think this is a glitch, but it's possible that there's just a simple explanation that the network aired the TV shows out of order. They actually messed up with a show that no one probably knows, little thing called Firefly, where they aired the episodes out of order. And of course this caused a lot of issues and poor ratings because people didn't know what the hell was going on. The show was supposed to start, but they were playing like the 6th episode or something. It was still cool, but obviously doesn't quite compute. So it's possible that's what happened. You just saw an episode that was already recorded and just aired earlier than it should have. Now, assuming this isn't the case, as I discussed before in a different case notes, I view timelines and our choices as a branching path line. So with enough information, it's conceivable that you could have predicted what would happen in the future. And given that these episodes are already recorded well in advance, that data is sort of already there, even in the present moment. You just didn't know it. Somehow it was transmitted into your brain. I don't know how or why, but it is conceivable. Much more than predicting the future years in advance, which is just outstanding. In a nutshell, I view life as a series of dominoes, a lot of dominoes, where you can knock one down and it'll send a ripple wave throughout all the universe, and that's the Big Bang. Everything spawned from there, and physics took over. Gravity slowly knocking down every domino. Thing is, we can choose where there are branching paths. You just remove one domino, and then a different one on the other side will continue along, and the domino chain is so long. And the thing is, we're all taking different choices throughout this pathway. So this long series of dominoes can be altered by anyone. We make those choices, somehow separate from the physics of the universe or incorporated in and animated by something beyond it. I don't know if that's God, I don't know if that's a server simulation, but something is above the universe that is allowing us to be above the physics, if that makes sense.
Creepy file number 45. Written by Unpretty Habits. Meatball saved my life. A little backstory leading up to this meeting.
I grew up in a shady area and would rarely leave home after 7 or 8 p.m. as it was considered dangerous. Going into high school, I got a pit bull. He was a gentle giant who loved everyone and everything. He had some protection work training before he joined our family. As he was getting older, he retired and I took him home with me. So back to the story. I was at this time 17 female, short, blonde, but very aware of my size. But having a big scary dog, I finally felt safe walking home alone. And on that very night, I had set out to take a longer walk as my dog, let's call him Meatball, really needed to run off some energy. I took him to the woods near my home and we walked along a gravel path that was partly lit. It was around 11 p.m. and quite dark outside. As we walked, I became aware of the fact that there really wasn't anyone else around. We walked for about 10 to 15 minutes before a man turned up behind us. We continued to walk and I noticed he is taking the same turns as me and Meatball. I speed up, feeling my heart beating in my chest. Meatball, who normally spent his time sniffing at the end of the leash, was now also very aware of the situation. He had slowed down and gotten so close to my leg with full focus on this man. I started turning at every turn I could and the man followed. Even though we were now walking in circles, he started getting closer and closer to us as I am now sure he is following us. I remember something my father once told us. Never let anyone follow you, as you're most vulnerable from behind. If you get in a situation where you can force your stalker to pass you, do. I stopped, grabbed onto Meatball's leash. I leaned back in the leash, acting as if I had to put my entire body weight in holding him back. Now, I am aware that at this point in my life, I looked small and weak, but as my father is an old veteran, I could fight before I could walk, and even holding Meatball back was not much of a task as I was a lot stronger than I looked. Well, I called out, trying to sound as naive as I could, hoping that if I did have to fight, I would surprise him with my strength. Excuse me, my dog really doesn't like people and I can't really hold him back when he lunges. If I step to the side, could you pass us so I have a chance at holding him back? As I say this, Meatball starts barking, growling, and snapping towards the man, who has now stopped. He looks me up and down, stares at Meatball, and turns around, not saying a word. He left quickly, and I called my parents and asked them to meet me, as I now realize he could easily hide anywhere on our walk back. My dad showed up only a few minutes later, baseball bat in hand. Nothing really happened, but after being followed by this man at every turn I took for at least 35 minutes, I know this could have ended really badly if I had not had Meatball or my dad close by. Case file number 731, written by Zach the Logical, The Illusionary Store. When I was 9 or 10, my parents and I were on a very long road trip. I was a sickly child, so we traveled a lot to see specialists around the country. I believe it was in Michigan, where we were driving through a very rural area. Lots of forests, not many people. It didn't seem strange to me at the time, but looking back now, I realize how strange of a place it was for such a large store to be. It was a long way from a town in either direction. In a cramped clearing barely big enough to fit the store and parking lot, there was what looked like something like an Amish store on the side of the road. But it wasn't exactly that. It looked almost industrialized, like how a smaller Target or Walmart store would look if it were trying to be country. I don't remember exactly why we stopped there, but I know we didn't plan to beforehand. We walked inside and immediately my alarm bells started going off. I was young enough that I didn't really understand, but I remember telling my mom that I didn't like it there. We walked around for a bit and I stopped my mom at an aisle full of country-style candy. That's when I noticed something specific that was wrong. Everyone else in the store looked incredibly vacant. They would stop to look at something on the wooden shelves for a few seconds, then move on one item at a time, almost robotic-like, and everyone was alone. No one interacted with anyone else and it was very quiet. That's when I told my mom I wanted to leave and I was very adamant about it. She was reluctant, but we met up with my dad, paid for our things and left. My memory of this place is pretty vivid, but I remember absolutely nothing about the cashier or anyone else who worked there. I remember trying to explain why I felt so strongly once we were on the road again, but my parents were a little frustrated and I was bad at explaining myself. A few months ago, I had a dream of a place like that, and the place was fresh on my mind again. When I saw my mom next, I brought it up to ask where it was, but she had no memory of the place. Even after I told her the whole story, she had no recollection of it ever happening. I asked my dad not too long after, and his reaction was the same. Even though we traveled a lot, we tend to remember the trips pretty well, so this was unusual. Any ideas why it was so eerie? Case file number 732, written by The Hybrid, the Translucent Predator. I've been dying to get this off my chest for years to people who don't think I'm crazy, as it's rather maddening. Before I start, I don't believe in things like Bigfoot, werewolves, ghosts, and so on, but it doesn't mean I'm able to explain what happened that night. It was a long time ago. I was a teenager. My parents were not strict, so I had a lot of freedom. I had 2 friends and they had their own friends as well, and one of my friends' parents owned a huge part of this forest. We, my friends and their friends, went deep into the woods with a bunch of supplies and started making our own treehouse and forts. This was a big part of my childhood, building stuff with my friends, and this place became our sanctuary for a long time where we'd spend a lot of our time away from adults. This event happened years after we built the place initially, and also after we rebuilt it because it got destroyed one time. But that's another interesting story for a different time. This is backstory for the events I'm about to recall. Me and my one friend spent the night at our sanctuary we built, which none of us had ever done before. We only hung out there, then went home. We all planned to spend the night together because it would be fun. Most of our friends weren't allowed to spend the night there because of their parents, and the other one that was allowed chickened out because he was afraid. So it was just me and one other person, my close friend's cousin. We weren't close at the time, and we fought a lot, but surprisingly, we got along well that night. We spent most of the day swinging from the trees, climbing them, and hanging out on this tie rope swing while talking. It was a normal day. Then we laid down for some rest at around 9 p.m. About 10 minutes after laying down in our sleeping bags, talking to each other under our makeshift tents, we heard ruffling. I sat up and saw a very tall silhouette of something that looked to be human, but that was transparent. I could see right through it. I squinted and froze, and it very quickly climbed up this tall tree when I looked at it disappearing. I was in complete disbelief and shock. I had no idea if what I just saw or if I hallucinated it. I wasn't scared at this moment, actually perplexed more than anything. Being young and worried though, I said to my friend we should leave, and not wanting it to hear me, I got close to his ear and just said, "There's something in the woods looking at us." After I said that, I saw his facial expression turn into fear, so we got up and started walking down the path out of the woods calmly. I didn't want to sprint because it might chase, and also I wasn't even sure I saw anything. I'm just not taking chances. We both, very shortly after we started leaving, got this weird feeling of déjà vu and confusion. Like we were hit with hard drugs or something, except we don't do drugs and only ate food from our house. No hallucinogenic plants in our part of the country. Nothing. Everything was so slow and I felt disoriented. But we continued to walk in this direction for quite a while, stumbling in the darkness because of our mental state. And I realized we should have been out of the forest by now. I knew this was the way out, 110% it was, because I've been going in and out of this place for years, even in the dark. Yet I didn't recognize all the trees around us, just the path. It was like our surroundings were changing. My friend randomly yelled, "Yeah, I'm coming," as I'm looking in the opposite direction from him, and I turned around and very confusingly asked why he is saying that. He says his mom is calling his name to help lead him out of the forest. I hear nothing at all. I tell him I don't hear anything, and he looks at me like I'm insane, and he walks off the path and into the forest. I grab his arm and pull him back because I don't want him to get lost. That's when my friend sees the transparent thing I saw earlier, sitting perched on a branch tree in the direction his mom was calling for him, and he points it out to me. Its transparency is almost like a heat wave effect. We stared at it for 10 seconds in disbelief. It looked like a transparent being, but we were trying to discern if it was something else and we were just imagining it being live, because there was no movement. But then it hunched down, like it's trying to stalk or be stealthy, and it quickly climbed up the tree a little more and went to the next one, then the next one, getting closer to us. We don't hear it at all. It's completely silent. Its silence is exemplified by the fact that all other creatures have gone completely silent too, which I had only begun to realize in that moment, that not a single bug or animal had made a sound since we started leaving. This is when our curiosity of if we were both tripping and were mistaking something turned to fear once we began to see it move. Once it got above us though, the only thing we heard is the crunching of the branch that had weight on it. Every little sound that is made is so distinct because it's quiet and remote. We can't see it because the top of the trees were so dark. We start actually running, terrified, not walking anymore. We hear noises in the tree above us until it fades away ahead of us as if it ran ahead, but the sound was a lot quieter than if a normal animal was running tree to tree, as if this thing was light, but it wasn't very small, so that made no sense. We still kept running forward, despite it sounding like it went ahead, and we ended up back at the place we started. Many minutes of walking, and we're back at this place after running for like 20 seconds? It's impossible. But instead of staying on the ground, we climbed to the top of the treehouse with our items as quickly as possible and closed the door, wedging a small piece of plywood onto it to keep it shut. We hear something climbing up and extremely odd noises as well, like mimicking noises of rain and wind, but there's no water seeping into our treehouse with cracks in it, and it wasn't wet when we left. This persisted for a minute and we didn't hear from it again. I'm pretty sure at that point it had left. But we spent the rest of the night there until the sun came up anyways. When we checked his iPod Touch for the time, this is right after we closed the door, it was 5 a.m. We started laying on the ground at 9 p.m. 8 hours passed in less than 40 minutes of perceived time. Hours after, we could start to see the sun through the treehouse, then we went home. I no longer talked to this friend, but after this incident we discussed it and said everything from both of our point of views were correct, and we randomly brought it up to each other every few months and relived it, making sure we're still on the same page about what happened and what we remember. I never spent the night out there again, and I didn't even let myself stay out there past 5 p.m. for a very long time. This is my story, and I'd be willing to take a polygraph test if the opportunity ever arises. It really happened.
Case notes for file 732. The Translucent Predator. So this is some sort of predator in the night, transmuting reality into a nightmare. It kind of feels like Freddy Krueger. I only know about that from Dead by Daylight, a video game. In it, I assume it's the same in the lore, but in it, if you get hit, you transmute into a dream zone, a nightmare zone, where everything doesn't feel quite right. And this would lapse in with the time loss you experienced, because in the nightmare zone, time isn't exactly passing the same way. I guess it was borrowed from Stranger Things, or one or the other borrowed from it. Where in the upside down world, time doesn't pass at the same rate. So it does seem that, for some reason, you were both trapped into this alternate pocket dimension of this entity. And I don't think it's an alien. It doesn't strike me as alien being. I mean, yeah, the only comparison would be in fiction of the Predator being able to cloak itself, but it doesn't strike me as some Arnold Schwarzenegger event. The other possibility is that it wasn't this Freddy Krueger alternate dimension event for a time loss, it was just adrenaline. Adrenaline can make time go wonky and seem like a few minutes pass, but in reality hours have. It can slow down your perception of time to give you faster reactions, which is pretty neat. And the other thing to mention is that, sadly, polygraph tests aren't very accurate. Polygraph tests are notoriously unreliable. It's more of an art to read it, and even then, it's far from perfect. They're not even admitted in court as evidence because it's not a high standard. It would be fun if we had some sort of device like they had in Stargate that the Tok'ra invented, where you could truly tell if someone was lying, or maybe Veritaserum from Harry Potter. One or the other would be cool. Perhaps one day.
case file number 733, written by Jorgos Borgos. The Quiet Forest with Heavy Shadows. I was in the military, a field training exercise, deprived of sleep, had an encounter with the dark forest and the human subconscious. We've been out for 4 days at this point with almost no sleep. We were a 4-man squad operating completely independently, securing battalion-level safe data. Got an order to relocate about 100 kilometers south to the coast. The day turned out to be quite long. Long story short, we were at combat readiness in a new location at 3 a.m. As the squad leader, I decided to take the first watch and let the guys get some well-deserved rest. So I grabbed my gear and started walking towards our guard position down the road from our camp. Guard position in this context meant a concealed position in a ditch with a good view down the road. I got to the spot that was just over 200 meters from our equipment. There was a bit of snow on the ground, the sky was clear, and it was absolutely dead silent in the woods. I just laid on my back, leaning on the bank of the ditch. This spot was lower than our camp, down the road into a kind of small valley, and it was a thick spruce tree forest, so all sounds that could have been in our camp on the higher ground, and almost on the shore, could hear the sea from our camp, just died down. I was dead tired. I lay there on my back just staring at the few stars peeking through the branches of the spruce trees until I realized it wasn't as silent as I had initially thought and that I could actually hear sounds from the woods behind my back. Just the most subtle little cracks, rustles, and other natural sounds. But as I concentrated on them, it was almost loud. Those little rustles became almost overwhelming sounds. And suddenly, I felt this fear of something. I immediately opened my eyes and jumped up, looking behind me into the dark forest. I didn't see anything, but I had this unexplainable sense of being extremely vulnerable, like something was preying on me. I just grabbed my rifle harder and even flicked off the safety and kept looking into every direction because I was completely circled by the thick dark forest. I did have 4 mags of blanks on me, so I thought if nothing else, full auto blank fire is a good way to scare away predators, although in these parts it was quite unlikely to run into anything that would pose a threat to a human. The weird part was that I couldn't control my reaction at all. I was able to think clearly and tell myself that this is idiotic, there's absolutely no threat out there and no reason to be afraid. But it was like different parts of my brain weren't able to communicate with each other because while I did realize that there is no threat out there and that this reaction is very unnecessary, at the same time, the feeling of dread became deeper and deeper. Do you know the feeling like having an invisible force pulling you down, almost like you weighed 1,000 pounds? I was looking out to the forest and the darkness was just swallowing me up. Almost like it was getting closer to me from all directions, almost like the darkness itself was a sort of being, and the sounds from the forest became totally exaggerated. At this point, I'm in the middle of the road on one knee, and the light snow cover on the road seems like the only thing I can see anymore. It was like this tiny island in the middle of a void of darkness. A darkness that was just trying to overpower and get to me. These guys were sleeping just over 300 meters away from me, but it felt like it could have been just as well light years away. Like everything was light years away, like I was completely separated from everything I know, on a totally different plane of existence. As if being lost at sea, I was lost in the dark, drowning in it. What made this such a weird experience is that it truly was like one half of my brain went completely rogue. The other half was talking sense and being calm, and the other refused to listen and was ringing every alarm bell available. It was like I was calm and panicked at the same time. At some point, the reasonable part of my brain took control and crap just calmed down. I just stood there thinking, what in the Blair Witch Project hell was that? I'm not sure how long that experience lasted. It felt like a short moment, but it definitely lasted longer than it felt. At some point, not too long after, one of the guys came down the road to release me from watch duty, smoked a cigarette and chatted for a bit. Then I walked back to camp, crawled in my sleeping bag, still just thinking about it. Never told anyone about that actually. I think I just allowed myself to sleep in the next morning. Never experienced anything like it before or after. Sleep deprivation is a hell of a drug, kids, and I think it's always a bad trip. Definitely learned from that and made sure all of us got more sleep from that day on. Case file number 734, written by Indigo Wolf, the not-so-blonde Blondie. My mom, manager, boyfriend, and bestie all say I have brown hair. The customers that say I'm blonde all say I had brown hair, but they insist I dyed it. One called me a liar today and got mad when I brought it up with him and told him I had not dyed it. I almost feel like I'm being punked, but the man that got mad is like in his 60s. I work at a gas station. I have a lot of regulars plus a ton of people who are just passing through. When I was very young, I had platinum blonde hair. However, I grew out of it and my hair turned very brown by the time I was 5. This isn't rare, it's just backstory. At this point, my hair is starting to get lightly sprinkled with gray, but it's still brown. The weird thing is, I have one regular that started calling me Blondie. When I asked him why, he said it was because of my blonde hair, with a tone that let me know he wanted to say, duh. I told him my hair was brown and gray. He looked really confused and I haven't seen him come in since, even though he's an everyday customer. Then, I started having regular compliments on my recent hair dye job. They tell me it looks so much better. I haven't dyed my hair. I've only been working at this place for about 4 months, so it's not like my hair has changed color much naturally in that time. I'm so confused. When I look in the mirror, I still see gray bits on brown. However, it seems like several other people are looking at me and seeing blonde, until I bring it up. Then they freak out. Case notes for file 734, the not-so-blonde Blondie. There was a previous story about a girl that was being called by a name that wasn't her name, but people were so certain that it was. This is even more interesting though, because it's visual. To have people convinced that your hair color is a different color, well, that's just weird. There's no real explanation for that. It'd be like me being bald and people thinking I have hair. There's no mind-altering substances involved here, no one's doing any sort of mind control. Maybe the way the light is hitting your hair in this gas station is causing it. I know sometimes hair can look different depending on what types of lights are around. Now if you're looking at yourself in the mirror in this environment. Of course after you say that you're not blonde, you're brown, you're brunette, they freak out. Hell, you had a regular customer that just stopped coming in because of this. Well, presumably because of this. I know I would be freaked out. What if as soon as you tell them that you're brunette, they start to see you as a brunette? Their whole mind perception changes. It's almost like, these illusionary tricks that you can see, like in Beyond Belief. Jonathan Frakes would always start the show with different illusions that fool your brain. Our brains are very vulnerable because we take so many shortcuts to process reality. There's too many things in reality, so our brain has to take these shortcuts to reconstruct it in a sort of sense. And because of this, there's plenty of perception glitches. You can see things moving when they're not moving, or maybe one thing will look bigger than the other. In terms of color, well, there was that one blue dress or white and gold dress. Some people were seeing it as white and gold, and in reality it was a blue and black dress. So something like that could be going on. Another thing is more out there, but if this is all a simulation, maybe some developer in the real world is just messing with you, making people see you as having blonde hair when you're a brunette. Case file number 735, written by Canes Are Pain Daw. My aura controls the TV. My presence glitches out the TV. We don't have paid TV, cable, whatever, but we've always had an antenna, rabbit ears for local channels. But I was sitting with my husband just now and was thinking, I find myself switching it off during important sports events on the TV. Usually we just watch Netflix, etc. Naturally, because I totally F up the antenna and the incoming picture. It bugs me, garbles, and has bad connections, so I'm happy to step out because I know it must bug him too, and I just can't stand the skipping sounds and messy delayed picture. This has occurred in our previous house, moved in October, as well, with both a current antenna and another antenna we had previously. And now that I think about it more, it's always been an issue but just for me, Sometimes I'll be by myself wanting to check out a current news event, and I just can't because it's jumbled. But my husband will have no problem. He'll be watching a tennis match and then a race event this afternoon, and I can hear it running no problem as I'm typing this. I just walked by for laundry, and the TV instantly turned jumbled. I remember laughing about it in our previous house too, and having to leave the room and stand a bit far back, especially because the news cycles were running a major current event in my city, and I just needed to watch, but I can't be close to the TV.
Case notes for file 735. My aura controls the TV. So there's a few aspects to this. The first is, I do believe this is actually documented as a very rare occurrence. It's called streetlight interference phenomena. We all have an aura in terms of electromagnetic radiation. So it's conceivable, if an antenna is just picking up radio signals, that maybe you emit some radio signals yourself. I don't think we're normally supposed to, but it's not inconceivable that we'd be able to. It's just a certain type of energy, a lower form of the EM spectrum, and we emit infrared all the time. So for some reason your body is producing radio waves, which would be my guess. If you get too close, you jumble up the signal, and then your husband can't watch good TV. How unfortunate. And it's sort of the basis of echoes or spirits interfering or messing with lights and electronics. It's all based on electromagnetism, which is sort of its own magical realm if you really want to think about it. If you really want to twist your brain, then look up the double-slit experiment, proving that photons and electrons, any atomic particle, is really just an excitation of a field. It can be both a particle as we think about it and a wave. It's trippy. And we don't yet have a solution to the observer problem, whereby if you observe the particle before it passes through either slit, then it'll collapse the waveform. Now, it's not perception or human sentience that causes this, it's just any observation of it. To observe something, we have to forcibly interact with it, and that interaction collapses the waveform. The problem is, it still makes a choice before this, and we don't know how. It's almost like it's temporal. It knows what we're going to do before it does. It's sort of like, it's making a choice ahead of time. It's very weird. You should look it up.
Bonus file, written by Kitty JJ. She's still here. Back in May, I lost a friend. She took her own life. She planned the entire thing out for over a year and none of us had a clue. She didn't leave a note or anything hinting as to why. But through the actions she took on our final day, we realized just how thoroughly she had planned it out and just how much she no longer wanted to be here. It was honestly what everyone says. They were the life of the party, always happy, full of life, full of joy, full of love. And now we understand we missed the signs. I found out 10 days after her passing. 2 days later, it was a Monday morning. I got into my car and turned it on. It instantly started playing Logic's 1-800 song. For those who don't know, this song is about suicide. I found it odd. My car normally picks a random song, but did it really have to be that song today? So I decided to let it continue on as I drove to work. The song ended and it began once more on replay. I don't play my music on replay, but I let it play again, and it replayed for a third time. By this time, I arrived at work, trying my hardest not to break down. About an hour went by and I got a message from my friend saying, "Hey, today's the viewing." I left work early, went home to change into a white outfit. Her family asked for a white dress code, picked up white roses, and with that, we set off to see her one last time. It was a beautiful service. Everything was pearly white. During the service, a bird flew into the church. It landed directly above her casket, all the way in the front of the church. It sat there for about 5 minutes, facing the crowd. Then it flew to the back and landed directly above her boyfriend, where it remained for the rest of the service. A few days after her service, I had a dream of her. We were in a white room, sitting on a white bed. We talked for a while. It felt so peaceful, so warm. I know I asked her why she left, and I know she told me why. But when I woke up, all I could remember was that we talked for a while and her beautiful, peaceful smile, but I couldn't remember anything about what was said. About a week later, I was having a rough day thinking of her. So when I left work, I asked her for a sign to let us know she was okay. I drove off, ran some errands, and went home. When I parked, I sat there for a moment just thinking of her. Then I realized my music had stopped playing. I grabbed my phone and kept pressing the play button, but it would not play. Then I looked at the song itself, Life Goes On by Tupac. After I read it, it began to play instantly. After this, I began noticing the times, 1:11, 11:11, 10:11, 11:01, whenever I would have a rough day thinking of her. As I write this, I notice 11:01. One day, I was out with her boyfriend. He and I have been friends since kindergarten, and he's the reason we all met her. And he shouted, "It's 1:11. I've been getting those a lot lately." And I looked at him in shock and said, "You too?" He's had even more strange experiences since her passing than I have. About a month ago, a friend of mine found 3 abandoned kittens. I picked them up because I normally shelter kittens until they're old enough to find homes. I showed her boyfriend a photo of the kittens and he suddenly had a shocked expression. Those 2 are the exact same color as the 2 she adopted before her passing. Monday of this week, I picked up a buddy of ours who had just returned from deployment. He was away for her passing and for her funeral. I filled him in on her last day and on the experiences after. He said he'd been ignoring any signs since her passing. He just wants to move on and they make it harder. As we talked, I looked at the clock and told him, "What did I tell you?" It was 11:11. As of yesterday, I began noticing more repeating numbers, not just my usual repeating ones. Well, this is just a few of the experiences that have happened since her passing. I'm not sure how to take them or what they could mean exactly, and maybe some of you may have some insight. But ever since her passing, our whole friend group has been experiencing odd occurrences letting us know she watches over us. So about a month ago, my best friend's dad passed away from cancer. Understandably, she's been noticeably off since then. I had a heartfelt talk with her last night, explaining just how hard things were for me when my best friend suddenly died in an accident on May 4th, 2021, and finding out our friend took her life the following day, May 5th. There are many obstacles we must overcome when losing a loved one, and it only gets harder after the funeral. I wish someone forewarned me, so I wanted to give her a heads up. My heart aches for her. The hell I endured and still continue to endure after losing my friends is what she is now enduring in losing her father. Today is her father's viewing, and honestly, I'm afraid of going. I'm flashing back to the pain I felt last year going to my 2 friends' viewings. I got into my car and started playing some music while I drove to work. All I could think of was a viewing to come later today. My car got to a song and would not play it, so I decided to skip the song initially, but went back to it to see if it would play. But again, it would not play. I looked at the title and read, Friends by J. Cole, and I remembered last year when I had the same experience of a song not playing after asking Jay for a sign. So I said, "Jay, is that you?" And Friends began to play. I almost lost it. She's still here. It's been months, but I still get signs. I still see repeating numbers a lot, every day, at least 3 to 4 times a day. January of this year, I was invited to Hard Summer. The ticket cost was about $230 total, and I normally don't like spending that much money in a day. So I sat there in the car contemplating on whether or not I should go. I looked at my dash and saw repeating 7s, so I checked the meaning and it said, "Reward yourself." So with that, I took it as a sign from Jay and bought my ticket. This music festival, Hard Summer, was this past weekend. Most of the time there, I would be laying on some grass, watching the sky and thinking of her. Why did she want me to come? What was the purpose of my being there? And as usual, I was seeing repeating numbers. My last day there, Sunday, started off as a normal day. I saw my usual time, 10:10 a.m., 11:11 a.m., and 3:33 p.m. I headed to the event, walked around for a bit, and eventually laid down on the grass. I checked the time and it was 10:10 p.m. Again, I pondered on why she wanted me to come. What was the reason? I edited my photos for a while and checked the time again. It was 11:11 p.m. So I got up and walked to the final stage to see 21 Savage. During his set, Each time I checked my phone, I got a repeating time, 11:22, 11:33, 11:44, and by this time, I asked her for one more sign. I couldn't believe how many she was sending consecutively, and the next one was 11:55 p.m. I stopped checking my phone for a while after this. I didn't want to cry. I proceeded to the grassy spot where I was laying down each day and waited for my friends. The next time I checked, it was 12:12 a.m. and again 12:22 a.m. A few minutes later, a guy walked by telling everyone, "Drive home safe. Life is beautiful." Not sure if that was a sign, but it was nice to hear that second part. My friends and I left the event and walked over to our shuttle pickup spot. We sat down on some grass to wait for the driver. I checked my phone and it was 1:11 a.m. on August 1st. I was okay by this time. I didn't cry the whole event. I held it together pretty well, but I was still wondering why she wanted me to come. She's never sent this many matching numbers in one day. What was the reason? Then a girl walked by with a totem sign and it read, "Look up at the sky, I'm still here." My heart felt like it dropped and I started bawling. She's still around. Case notes for the bonus file. She's still here. This is a heavy story indeed. It's good in a way to know that she's still there. It'll lessen the blow. And you've had so much trauma and sadness to lose 2 friends and then also your other friend losing their father to cancer. Man, that's just brutal. And I hope tremendously that quantum immortality is true, because if it is, they're still around. Their sentience is still there, living in a different universe. Disconnected from you, but at least still there. It's almost like the idea of the afterlife, but it's just continuing in this life. You don't get angels singing on harps, and I guess my heaven would be an endless buffet of food and the impossibility of getting fat. Just eat all day. Chocolate cakes and pizzas and submarines and all that. That's heaven, indeed. I thought the bird was an interesting aspect to this. Perhaps somewhat drawn to the echo of your friend that lingers behind. It's a beautiful thought. I could see someone making a painting of that. This beautiful white dove just landing by your friend's casket, giving her a proper send-off, and perhaps a sign that part of her is still around. But like the previous story, the EM spectrum can be manipulated. So if we take that into account, this echo of your friend, if she wants to send a sign, well, what better way than to manipulate a song playing or not? Somehow she's figured out how to control if a song will play or repeat or which song will come up next. Pretty brilliant. As soon as you read the song title by J. Cole, Friends, boom, it starts to play when it wasn't playing before. That's incredible. And honestly, I think that she is tethered to you, which is why she wanted you to go to the concert, because she wanted to experience the concert too. She probably isn't able to move far beyond you. So in a way, she's living vicariously through your life. So I think the best thing you can do for her is to live a great, exciting life. Case file number 736. Written by Skiki D. The credit card with an impossible perk. I have a purse with a regular wallet, but I also have a small coin purse that I can put in my pocket. I carry just the coin purse when I drive for DoorDash with a chapstick, driver's license, debit card, and a Dasher credit card. I started doing this because I had the bad habit of putting them in my pockets and misplacing them. One day last month, I misplaced the credit card. I wasn't sure how, but it was missing for a few days. I didn't worry too much about it until I was packing to go out of town. I needed the card, so I searched high and low and found it. I tucked it in front of the zipper pouch of my purse so I knew I would have it. I was so happy to have located it. I told my roommate. I remember this clearly. The next day, I'm out of town and go to do a delivery shift and grab the card to put it in the coin purse. But it's not there. I turned the purse inside and out, then the wallet, then the coin purse. I was so frustrated and confused that I searched my car, my laptop bag, suitcase, and even toiletries bag. I asked my roommate for help to search for it, and he didn't find it either. After several days, I gave up and ordered a new one. I got it yesterday, activated it, and tucked it in the coin purse. All that's been in there for the last month is my driver's license, debit card, chapstick, and a dollar bill. I went to pull out the new card tonight to use it, and what else do I find in the coin purse? The original card that's been missing for a month.
Case notes for file 736. The credit card with an impossible perk. Cool, so another DOP phenomena. It's right in my wheelhouse. It's the only thing the universe is ever going to throw my way in terms of glitches or paranormal events. Nothing cool, no ghosts, no aliens, just tennis balls vanishing. That's it. And they never even came back for me. At least you got your credit card back. I have to say though, as far as credit card perks go, the ability to return from the ethereal void is pretty high up there. Nice.
Case file number 737, written by Mostly Nothing. The painting that saved our lives. This all happened about 10 years ago. I was in my early 20s. I lived in an old city in Eastern Europe. House was large and old, close to downtown, and partitioned into 5 to 6 apartments. I lived in the smallest. It was 1 bedroom, kitchen and bathroom, and was almost below ground level. Not sure what you call that in English. Anyway, there was a large gas oven/stove in the kitchen that we used for both cooking and heating. One night, my then girlfriend and I lay in bed, half asleep, when a small painting that was hung on the wall above me shifted. Mind you, I've been living there for the past 10 years. Nothing ever moved. No breeze, as I only had a door and a window and they were both on the same side. I freaked out. Jumped out of bed and turned the lights on. I couldn't understand how that painting suddenly moved. Went to the kitchen to look around. I noticed the gas was turned on in the oven/stove, but there was no flame. It was basically leaking gas. I switched it off and quickly realized that had the painting not moved on the wall, I was probably going to die that night. Nothing like that has ever happened before or since.
Case notes for file 737. The painting that saved our lives. You know, it's weird. While reading this story, what I kept thinking about was 1984 and the painting in Winston's playroom, where he fools around with the girl that he's not supposed to, in the upstairs of the shop area. And there's a painting of a golden valley or something like that on the wall. Of course, the state is spying on him through the painting, and it's quite creepy. It doesn't really make sense because it's a guardian angel event. Something tried to save you, and did. So it's not spying exactly, but definitely something is around. Maybe some loved one that you recently lost, or it doesn't even have to be recent. Maybe it takes a long time for some echoes to learn how to use their powers, their ability to manipulate the EM spectrum in order to move things around. I guess it can't be simple, can it? Maybe it's a natural gift for some. I wonder if I'll be any good at that.
Case file number 738, written by Try and Try Again, 123. That's not my Connie. When I was 16, I took an SAT prep class to improve my score and get into a good college. The class was pretty boring, but I met the most interesting girl in the class. She was thin, fairly short, with light brown hair and green eyes. She always wore a green headband, which I thought was cute. Her name was Connie. We hit it off immediately and spent most of the class whispering to each other, side by side at our desks. I spent about 3 weeks sitting next to her talking during the class. When the class was over, we exchanged instant messenger handles so we could keep in touch. This was the early 2000s. About a year passed and we continued talking online. We got to know each other pretty well, but we lived on completely different sides of the city, and it was quite a drive to visit each other. So, being the young teens we were, we never actually got together. Eventually, I worked up the courage to ask her out for dinner. I set our date at a restaurant located between the both of us so we wouldn't have to drive too far. The time for our date rolled around and I headed to the restaurant to meet her. I walked in and saw her sitting in a booth with 2 older individuals at the far side of the establishment. She looked exactly like she did in the class. Thin, light brown hair, green eyes, and she was wearing her signature green headband. I approached her and said hello. I gave her a hug and sat down next to her in the booth. I assumed these 2 older individuals across from us were her parents. Odd, I thought, but maybe they were there to chaperone. I could tell immediately something was wrong, though. The 2 older individuals looked very confused, surprised, almost bewildered. The look on Connie's face was also one of perplexity. Eventually, she said, "Who are you?" I was shocked by this. I said, I'm Jason. Remember, we set up a date for tonight? I assume these are your parents. It's very nice to meet you." And I reached out my hand to shake her parents' hands. They didn't return my handshake. Instead, they simply looked at their daughter and said, "Oh, did you forget to tell us this, Sarah?" "Sarah? You told me your name was Connie." She looked absolutely puzzled and said, "Sorry, you must have me confused with someone else." "Oh, my mistake?" Then I scratched my head and headed out of the restaurant to my car. I was embarrassed. Maybe she just didn't want to go out with me, I thought. She could have at least said no instead of leading me on the charade. Defeated and humiliated, I decided to just head home. When I opened the door to my car, I heard a voice behind me say, "Hey, Jason!" I turned around. It was a tall, light blonde-haired woman with a large round face and blue eyes. Do I know you?" "It's me, Connie. We had a date planned, remember? Where are you going?" We went inside and had dinner. She was definitely Connie. She remembered all of our previous conversations over the past year, but she looked nothing like the girl I met in class. When I asked her why she stopped wearing her green headband, she had no recollection of ever wearing or even owning this type of headband. I can't explain it. Case notes for file 738. That's not my Connie. Now I'm thinking about another story I recently read where a woman was in a neighborhood and she was pregnant and then went to the hospital and came back and she was an entirely different woman. Some of the neighbors remembered some differences, but no one really appreciated that it was an entirely different person. Now in this case, it clearly is a different person. You met her in class, you knew exactly what she looked like, you approached her and it wasn't her, it was Sarah. What I'm thinking is maybe it was Connie, but she wanted you to date her friend and didn't want to break your heart. So she got her friend to pose as Connie. Now this is very convoluted, and obviously if this is the case, it wouldn't work long term. I remember as a teenager I would crack up crazy plots to go places to get out of going to school. It made no sense and obviously wasn't going to work, but I still tried it. In the realm of mundane explanations, that's possible. The other thing that could be possible is some sort of memory alteration. Our memories are all bundles of connections, which is why if you think about something often enough, it reinforces those connections, which makes it easier to recall them. The thing is, if you jumble those connections improperly, then you can be convinced of a memory that isn't true. In fact, this is why eyewitness testimony is very low on the evidence chain in court, because we can convince ourselves that a memory is so certainly true, but it isn't. And you mentioned that it was over a year since you actually saw her again. Now, I don't know if she sent pictures. If she did, if there's any pictures you could find, that would be something. Of course, this happened back in 2000, so it wasn't as common to send pictures back then. Hell, did we even send pictures over Instant Messenger? Maybe we didn't. Starting to feel old.